Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Brienne, she was nervous though she was of a size with some of the men. Taking part in a proper melee was not the same as taking part in the squire's duel or the squire's melee. This was different. You could be hurt far worse. Lady Dacey and her sisters, though, were fighting, as was Prince Oberyn's daughter, Oberyn. Five women competing against over 50 men. She was proud of that, proud to be one of them. Jon and Loras had wished her good fortune that morning. Cregan too, and Dacey had come to give her reassuring words, though with a little added bite also. "You'll do fine, Brienne. I thank you, my lady." "Dacey, besides, you won't think me a lady when I'm hitting you with my mace," Dacey said, and Brienne laughed with her. As she moved closer to the beginning of the melee, she felt her palms sweat, felt her chest tighten. She tried to loosen up, tried to relax, but found she couldn't, as she was taut and tight, like a bowstring, ready to snap, and so she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. If she couldn't change how she was feeling, then she would use it. And as she opened her eyes, she began to assess her completion. The great and small Johns, Walder, Lyle Crakehall, Jon Royce, and his sons, the Blackfish, Lady Dacey and her sisters, Obara and Sir Daemon Sand. She could see Sir Rollin Storm and Lord Beric Dondarrion and many others, and once again she found her nerves begin to get the better of her. The voice which she heard then surprised her. Not that she didn't know it, but that he was as far as she'd aware, far from her only a moment ago. "Relax, breathe, and let the first swing of your sword be your guide," Walder said, and she nodded as the herald took to his feet. The Blackfish. His nephew waved to him from the stands, and he resisted the urge to wave back, simply nodding instead. His eyes once again going to the boy sitting with the blonde girl, to Jon Snow, to his reason, or one of them, for coming to this damn tourney. That his niece and nephew hadn't been invited proved the truth of Sansa's letter. That other men from the Riverlands had been, proved the truth of how perilous their position truly was. The boy, though, was nothing like Cat had claimed him to be, something he had known for himself for many a year. He'd seen him in Lannisport, heard of him since then. Both Arya and Bran spoke highly of him, as did Sansa and Robb. He'd convinced Ned to arrange their fostering, had offered to Squire Bran himself when he was knighted, and that alone was more than enough. But seeing him with those around him, watching him up close, it was clear this was not a covetous bastard. This was not a boy plotting to steal his brother's inheritance. "Your graces, my lords and ladies, welcome to the grand melee of the tourney of Highgarden of 29v5 AC, and in honor of Lady Margaery's name day." He tuned out the rest and instead just concentrated on the boy, on Jon Snow. There was something about him, something familiar, and what it was he couldn't quite place, and it annoyed him. It was clear they'd set his family up. They'd allowed for news of the boy's death to be spread and for it to reach Riverrun. Speaking to Lord Jason the day before, hearing what Edmure had done, what Lady Shella had said, he felt more shamed about his house than ever. To celebrate a child's fall. To make light of the murder of a young boy. That wasn't honorable. To do so at a feast. To stand up in front of you bannermen and to offer a toast on it. Was just plain idiocy. While not a man of faith, he did try to keep to the teachings, and the mother wouldn't look down kindly on a man who reveled in the death of a child. Neither would the lords of the Trident. "You lost in thought, old friend. I may take the day after all," Jon said, and he chuckled. "As long as we do better than Blanc," he said, and Jan almost doubled over in laughter. "The day I fight so poorly is the day I put my sword on the wall, Brendan." "Aye, good fortune to you, Jon." "You too, old friend." He took one last look up to the crowd, one last nod in the direction of his nephew, and as he turned from Jon Snow, he swore he saw a ghost. He searched the crowd once again, but couldn't find him, and shook his head as the man from the Stormlands came looking for a fight. Raising his sword, he nodded and then chuckled. Why the hell would he think he saw Sir Richard Lonmouth after all these years? "Usse, to say he was nervous was an understatement of epic proportions. Had he not been holding his daughter, he'd be out there standing by her side. Sword drawn, ready to protect her mother. Yeah, of course she'd slap him over the head and hit him with her mace for the thought of it. But still, he'd be there if he could. Given what had almost occurred with Jurion earlier, he'd a right to be nervous, he felt. Thankfully, Jon had been watching, for he had no doubt it was he and the Hawk, And as he looked down on Jon and his cousins, on him, pointing out to Joy who to cheer for, and to Tywin and Walder, looking on as he named each of the competitors, he smiled. If he watched out for Jaime, he'd watch out for Daisy, and his wife was more than capable of watching herself regardless, he thought, smirking at the memory of their morning. "Who'd you bet on?" Daisy asked. "I never bet against family," he said, and she kissed him. "And Jon?" "Why, want to make some coin, my love." "Just want to know who I should keep away from," she said, laughing. "He reckons Walder will take it." "Him or the great Jon," Daisy said. "Now that'll be a fight. Be safe, my love." "You be safe. I'll be too busy cracking skulls," she said, and moved away before he could slap her pert arse. "Look, Joanna, there's your mother." "Wave to her," he said, holding her little hand up. "Give me her. You'll be far too nervous in a few moments," he heard his good mother say. He looked at her and knew better than to argue, and so he handed his daughter and caught his sister's look as he did so, the scowl on her face when he was learning to enjoy. Leaning forward, he kissed his daughter's head, and then turning back, he smirked before he stood up. 1,000 gold dragons on Jaime Lannister, he said, and found no takers. "Are you not men?" he said, and still nothing. "Fine, 2-1. No one took the bet, and he sat down, and his good mother looked at him. "Were it not my daughter, I'd have taken that bet," she whispered. "But you won't?" "Never bet against family, Jaime," she said, and he smiled, and then looked on nervously as the fight began. "Daisy, God's your husband is an idiot," Lyra said. "Aye, he is my idiot. Now speaking of idiots," she motioned to the Riverlands men coming their way. "Ladies, if you would be so kind," Lord Patrick said. "I'll see how kind you think I am, in a moment," Lyra said, and the fight had begun. She found herself face to face with 2 Freys and a Bracken, and quickly made for the Freys. The fight wasn't really won, and lasted mere moments, as they soon yielded. The Bracken, though, was the Lord's heir, and a tougher sort. Brendan, she believed he was called, not that it would matter. She swung her mace, and the more she did so, the freer she felt, the more alive she felt. Each rattle of the man's sword, each clang of the metal sounding like an old, familiar song. By the time she had beaten him, Lyra had lost, and she was surprised at that. Almost as surprised as Lord Patrick was when he yielded to Jure. These Riverlanders had never gone hunting bears before, obviously. She moved on to the next man. A man she knew well. The strong boar was one of Yami's lealest men, and a good man and true, she felt. "Shall we, Daisy?" he said, and she was grateful for that. Facing him was difficult enough without the man annoying her too. "I wish you good fortune, Lyle." "You too, Daisy." The fight was as hard as she'd ever faced, as tough as she knew. God's strength. He was like the Umbers, though. Not as fast as either, but he had the Small John beat in strength, and she was forced back again and again. He was slower, though, and she found she could dodge him, though it wasn't her style. Still, she resorted to it, and finally found an opening. The swing was hard and heavy, and when the sword fell, she brought the mace to his neck and saw him smile. "I yield gladly to my lady of Casterly Rock," he said. And she smiled as she breathed heavily. "I thank you, Lyle," she said, and he nodded as he walked off. "Who's next to face Goatsbane?" she heard Small John shout, and she laughed as she looked to see the big idiot swing his sword. "Shall we, sister? Do you want to go slay a giant?" she said, looking to Jari. "I really do." "Brienne?" She'd beaten the first couple of opponents, easily, and now she looked at the one coming towards her. The Bastard of Night Song dwarfed her easily. He had her beat in all aspects, and she resigned herself to her fate. She'd lose, but would go down fighting, though the fight never came. Instead, he was faced with a man of equal size, and she found herself faced with Lord Beric Dondarrion. Looking at Walder swing his axe was incredible to her. More than that, it was poetic. Serdiaran, Jon, Jaime, they were the best swordsmen she knew. Precision, pace, power, they possessed it all. The older men were stronger than Jon, but none were faster. But Walder, he was more like her. He was big and powerful, quick, and moved with purpose. Where the others danced, he moved methodically, though far faster than he should, and she watched in awe as he and Ser Roldan fought. "Were I a lesser man, I'd take advantage of your distraction, my lady," Lord Beric said. "Then I'm glad you're not my lord," she said, and bowed. Beric was good, but she felt it only a matter of time, only needing to await an opening. And she'd have him beat, but the sounds of the sword hitting the axe, the sound of the shield being crashed against diverted her attention, caused her a momentary lapse, and she had lost before she knew it. "Yield, my lady." "I do, my lord?" "Well met, Lord Beric, I wish you good fortune," she said, and he nodded, moving on. Rather than leave immediately, though, she turned to watch the fight beside her. Two titans giving it their all. She had sparred briefly against Walder, had helped take care of his armor and weapons. She had seen him against Ser Daeron, and yet this was the first time she'd really seen him, and he was, to her, incredible. The sheer power he got in those swings, the quickness of his movement. As she watched, she saw the bastard of Nightsong fall, and she loved every single moment of it. Walking back with Ser Rosen, she found him to be a graceful loser. A man who took the loss to a better man. Well, I wish I'd put my coin on him rather than myself, he said, and she chuckled. We should hurry, sir. We'll miss the rest, she said, and he nodded, and they quickened their movements. Rhaegar? Watching her girls fight was both worrying and filled her with pride. Seeing Lyra fall was no shame, something she told her when she finally made her way to their seats. Not that Lyra was listening. She looked out at her two other daughters. Elisane was the closest to her. Lyra her jokester, and Lyanna her little bear. But Jory and Daisy were her pride and joy when it came to battle. Jory may one day outshine her older sister, but today wouldn't be that day as she watched her yield to the small Jon, Goatsbane Umber, and she chuckled at the story of that day. She and Lyra and Jaime all moved a little forward in their seats as Daisy faced the small Jon. She looked down to see the excited look on Lyanna's face as she and Arya both cheered Daisy on. Each swing of the mace, each crash of the sword, she felt as if she was down there herself. She found her attention so focused on their fight that the world around them seemed to cease to exist. It seemed to falter, fall, and then so did the giant Umber Air. Did you see that, Mother? Did you see how she caught him? I taught her that, Rhaegar said, and she didn't bother to correct her, for it was she who taught her that move as it was she who taught it to Lyra too. I saw it. Wave to your mother. Little bear, she said to Joanna. Daisy had allowed the small Jon to wear himself out, his strikes hitting the shaft of the mace, the top of it, but never forcing the mace back. She had used his power and deflected it over and over again, forcing him to change his tactics, and then she had taken his feet from underneath him. She had seen her do it to him when they were children, and he had obviously forgotten. The big oaf, she thought, as she smiled, looking proudly at her daughter. How many are left? Lyra asked, and she looked out, eager to know herself. 6, Jaime said, and she nodded. The Blackfish, Ser Daemon, Sand, Lord Beric Dondarrion, the Great Jon, Walder, and Daisy. 3 of the North, and she felt her pride fill up at that. 3 of the North and 1 a lady, 1 her daughter. That was something to be proud of, she thought. Oberyn had fine form, fine balance. She was stronger than she looked, but she was rash, impulsive, and worst of all, far too confident. No matter how he had tried to teach her, how he had tried to get her to learn, she continually fell into the same traps. He had tried to let her know that a mistake in a spar, in a tourney, was nothing. It was a lesson that you took on board and used to grow from, but she had not listened. She's hurt, my love, Ilaria said concernedly, and he watched as his daughter limped from the field. Then maybe this time she will heed the warning I gave her. What if it's bad? Tydier asked. It's not. She took a knock in the knee, but the Blackfish pulled his strike. The man is far too honorable to hurt an opponent without cause, he said, and Nyme nodded. She at least took Ser Justin down. That she did, he said, smiling. She and Daemon had lured the man in easily. He had thought he'd face Daemon, but it was Oberyn's spear. He had felt, and his daughter had ensured he felt it, across his arm, against his leg, and across his back before the man yielded. Though it had made her even cockier, even more sure of herself, and so, while Daemon bid her wait, she'd instead challenged the Blackfish, and as he tried to get to her, Daemon had found himself in his own fight. By the time he'd won, she'd lost, and while Daemon moved to avenge her, she limped out. Daemon never made it to the Blackfish, though, and he cringed at his former squire's fate as he stepped up to face the larger of the Umbers. The Great Jon was a monster of a man, only dwarfed, perhaps, by the giant who guarded his nephew, the giant who now faced Lord Beric, leaving Daisy and the Blackfish to face each other. She's done well, my love, Ilaria said, motioning to Daisy. She has. A fine performance, he said, kissing his paramour, and watching as the fights began once again. Daemon tried his damnedest, using speed and movement and trying to tire the man out. But it was a wasted effort. The fight was beyond him. So he looked to see Daisy yield, to see Lord Beric on one knee, and watched as the Great Jon and Daemon's fight came to an end. 3 men left, and soon to be 2, as the Blackfish and Walder began their own fight. He looked to Illyria, who had a small smirk on her face, and he leaned in to ask her what she was laughing at. "Did I not tell you of the note?" she said casually. "Note?" he said, and she laughed a little more now. "It must have slipped my mind," she said, and handed it to him. "Aunt Illyria, place your coin on Walder." "Your nephew." "Jamesy." "No, you did not. How much have we wagered?" he asked. "A lot, my love," she chuckled as he shook his head. "Jon." "Papa," Joy said happily when Jaime arrived. "There you are, princess. Didn't I tell you I'd be all right, didn't I promise?" "You did, Papa Pennut." "How could I resist such a reward?" Jaron said, and quickly swallowed the peanut. He looked at him, nodded, and mouthed thank you, and then sat beside him and Joy and watched the last of the melee take place. 6 competitors remained, and Jon looked to Yane to see the worry on his face. When Daisy yielded, a combination of tiredness, rustiness, and the Blackfish's own skill being the cause of her defeat. Jon laughed at the expression on Arya and Lyanna's face when Bran cheered, neither girl appreciating his brother's support of his future knight. Behind him, Robb, Loras, and Cregan looked on with excited looks, while Sansa spoke to Lord Willis, who had moved from his seat to be closer to them. He wished Margaery could do the same, but while it was one thing to not sit with the prince after how he behaved, it was another to sit with the bastards who caused his misbehavior. He had told her it wasn't a problem the night before, told her he understood, and he did. She did too. But he wished it were not so, that they could sit, hold hands, be together, and he hoped that wasn't the reason he wished to speak to his supporters. That he wasn't thinking how he was based on missing Margaery or wishing to be more open, that it was instead the behavior of the queen and the prince that was focusing his mind. "You got him," he heard excitedly, and focused where he should have been, on the fight outside his head rather than the one inside. "Did you see that, Jon? It's Walder against the Great Jon," Robb said, touching his back. "How much coin did you wager, brother?" he asked, and then decided to twist the knife a little when he saw the look on his brother's face. "He looks very tired to me. I think the Great Jon may take this." "But you said," Robb said before he slapped him hard on the shoulder, making Jon grimace a little, damn it. "Jon, I used all my coin, you arse." "Don't worry, brother. He's got this," he said, and saw Robb relax while Jaron smirked. "Joy, look, 2 giants are about to fight," he said, and saw the girl look on excitedly. Considering the size of the 2 men facing each other, the power they put into each of their swings, and the sheer brute force on show, it was the technique and the speed which Jon admired the most. The Great Jon moved swiftly across the ground. For a man who was close to 7 feet tall and gods know how much heavier than his son, he moved twice as fast as the small Jon. Walder, though, was even faster. When Jaime had suggested a different weapon for him back in Winterfell, he had told him that with the axe in his hand, he'd be an imposing sight. When he had begun to train him, Jaime said it would only be a matter of time before he was as proficient with it as they were with swords. Looking at him now, Jon could see that time had come. He looked back to see Arthur and Jars looking on eagerly to see Jaime watch, and then he saw Oberyn smirk and nod, and he knew then he'd been right. The 2 men swung, great sword to axe. They used their bodies in between swings. The Great Jon catching Walder with a knee, Walder crashing into the Great Jon with a shoulder charge. Neither man moving from the impact, he could hear the crowd cheer, hear the king cheer, and then he watched as Walder's axe went from his hand. The crowd gasped as Walder dodged, and then there was silence as Walder ducked under the swing and pushed the Great Jon two-handedly almost 5 feet away from him. He caught the man so much by surprise that the great sword went in one direction and the Great Jon in the other. Both men were unarmed, but only one was on his feet. And as the Great Jon crawled for his weapon, Walder ran for his. It was Jon's Kingsguard who made it first, and as the Great Jon grabbed his sword and picked it up as he went to get to his feet, the axe was already laying on the back of his neck. "Yield?" Walder asked. I yield." Jon, Joy, his family, both his uncles, Jaime and the Lannisters, the king himself, and the entire crowd cheered as Walder helped the Great Jon to his feet. Both men walking to stand in front of the king, and Walder giving him a nod, which he returned with a large smile. "Your graces, my lords and ladies, I give you the winner of the grand melee, Sir Walder Ehlers." Jon went to visit Walder in the tents afterward to bid him his congratulations and tell him how proud he was of his performance. Cregan had gone with Tyrion and Joy along with the rest of Jon's family back to the keep, the clouds having come out and rain no doubt soon to be on the way. And his Uncle Ned had stopped him to ask to speak with him. Jon had put him off for now, though Oberyn hadn't accepted when he said the same to him and had insisted he walk with him. His uncle still a little upset over the events of the day before. "How much did you wager, Jon?" Oberyn asked. "Not much, but look at Jers. He made quite a killing today. Didn't you, Jers?" he said, and his Kingsguard chuckled. "I wish we had tourneys every moon, with how good your tips are. I could be rich," Jar said, laughing. As they reached the tents, he had a strange encounter with a man he didn't know which way to take. The Blackfish was Catelyn's uncle, Edmure's uncle, and so he expected him to be like them. But he had only heard good things about the man. His uncle Ned respected him enough to allow Bran to squire for him, and Richard thought him a good man, though Jon had no experiences with him to judge him by. Prince Oberyn. "Sir Brynden, you fought well today." "Not well enough, my prince. You must be Jon Snow," he said, looking to him. "I am Serad. I believe my brother is to squire for you, Sir Brynden." "He is. I heard you had suggested you take him yourself," the man said, staring at him. "I did, sir. Should I be lucky enough to earn my own knighthood, then I'd have been more than happy to have my brother with me. Though having him squire for a knight of your renown may turn out far better for his prospects." "You think so?" the Blackfish said, and Jon could feel his eyes boring deep into his own. "I think there are some who would look down upon a bastard knight squire. Some who couldn't see past the stain the knight himself would be considered Sura." Yeah, the truth of it? There are fools everywhere. It's true. That there are, sir. If you'll excuse me, I need to go congratulate my own knight, my friend and protector." "Very well, we'll speak again, Jon Snow," the Blackfish said, looking at him and nodding. "Sir." Prince Oberyn. "Sir Brynden." They had only walked a few feet when Oberyn spoke, just as soon as the Blackfish was out of earshot. "That man is not living up to his name. He's a fish. He should be swimming, not fishing," Oberyn said, and Arthur chuckled behind him. I know, though he shows no malice or ill intent. More curiosity, I feel." "As do I, but what is he curious about?" Oberyn asked. "That I do not know, my prince. Perhaps something to discuss another time." "We have much to discuss, Jon," Oberyn said. They saw Brienne inside the tent, helping Walder to remove his armor, the big man sitting down, resting on a chair. Jon walked over and patted him on the shoulder and told him how incredible his effort was, surprised to see him blush a little. He would have stayed longer and had intended to when the rains came. But soon the wind picked up, and rather than staying in the tents, they headed for the safety of the keep. As they were walking back, he saw Oberyn stop in his tracks and look at a small cart, a large boy and a huddled man sitting in it. The boy was shivering, already soaked through, and the man took a look the worst for wear, his gray robes singling him out as a maester. Jon looked closer and thought he recognized the boy, and then remembered from where he had met him a few years earlier in Old Town, Tardley. Samwell Tardley. "Uncle," he said, happy there was no one else around, standing in the rain, who could overhear him. "Marwyn, Jon, that man is Marwyn, the mage." They made their way over to the cart, the maester happy to see a familiar face, and Samwell seeming pleased that someone was stopping them from having to find a tavern to stay in. "You had better come with us," Oberyn said, and Marwyn nodded, leaving the cart in the middle of the street. "The cart?" Jon asked, and Samwell shook his head and shivered before grabbing some things from the back. They hurriedly made their way into the keep, Oberyn joining them and walking to his rooms, and once they'd dried off a little, and Jon had started a fire for the two wettest of them to dry themselves off properly, he sent for something warm for them to drink. The mage, though, stood up and walked to him, looking him over. "It is good to finally meet you, Jon Snow." "You too, Marwyn," he said, and the mage walked with him to a quieter corner, while Oberyn walked over to distract Samwell. "There is much we must discuss, my prince. Much we must talk over. Long have I wished to meet his son. Long have I wanted to see the prophecy revealed." "You knew my father?" he asked curiously. "Not as well as I'd have liked. But we exchanged letters, he and I. We met briefly. You have much of him in you. Yaxians. Much indeed. Can you tell me about him?" "I can, and I will, but we have many things we need to discuss, my former brothers being amongst the most important, as well as an old lady who knows much of you." "An old lady?" he asked curiously. "What know you of Summerhall, my prince? Of Jenny and the Ghost of High Heart? Highgarden 2095 AC. Marwyn?" The boy was nothing like his father. True, he had only met Rhaegar briefly, but even then, it was clear there was a sadness in the prince, something that he didn't see in the boy before him. Once they'd been fed and warmed up, Oberyn had seen to having rooms readied for them, and after changing, he was brought back to Jon Snow's room. He found the boy sitting by the bed, the large direwolf laying on the floor, and he looked on in amazement. "Remarkable thing to see, my prince. Call me Jon, please. There are far too many people here who'd enjoy finding out who I really am," the boy said, smirking at Oberyn when he took his seat. "Jon, how much do you know of what Prince Oberyn and Lord Tyrion had me do in the Citadel?" "I know of your work, Maester." "Good," he said, handing him the list, which the boy looked at before handing it to Oberyn. "This is all of them?" Oberyn asked. "It is," he said, and watched as Oberyn looked to Jon and nodded. "Otar and Caedus?" Jon asked. "Brightwater Keep in Yernwood, Jon," and he noticed the look on Oberyn's face as he realized what that would mean, but it was Jon who was quicker. So not just the Lord Paramounts, but also their strongest bannermen, too. "Indeed, it would seem my former brothers wished to ensure they decided who ran the realm. That should they be unable to control the fate of a house directly, then they'd use their bannermen to do so. They poisoned Yronwood," Oberyn said, and Jon looked to him. "Oh, I thought that was you, uncle." As if I would need to resort to such a thing, Lord Edgar was a fool, Jon, but not enough to kill him. "Not for a night with a woman who was not your aunt," Oberyn said, and Jon chuckled. "Then why not explain it?" Jon asked. "I am the Red Viper of Dorne, a legend in my own lifetime. The damage was done, nephew, the insult already blamed upon me. At that point, my exile and Yronwood's slight were already known, so I accepted it and the name." Oberyn said with a bow that had Jon laughing again. "But this was an attempt for what? To force a war between you? Why? What did it benefit them then?" Jon asked when he stopped laughing. "Nothing then, Jon, but perhaps later on the bad blood remains, and where there is bad blood," he said before Oberyn interrupted him. "There is someone seeking vengeance," Oberyn said. "So Otar did this. What of Cates? Why hasn't he done anything?" Jon said before he shook his head and looked at Oberyn rather than him. "Can a woman be... is it possible to make a woman wish to couple?" Jon said, and Oberyn and he both chuckled at the boy's sudden blush. "I know of many ways, nephew. Maybe we can talk later," Oberyn said and wiggled his eyebrow, making the boy blush some more. "I mean by giving her something. If one was to give someone something to a woman, would it make her more agreeable? There are things, yes, potions I know of that are available in some houses of ill repute. I'm sure the Maester may know of even more than I, but why do you ask, nephew?" "Delena Florent," Jon said, and even he gasped at that. "Why would they wish the king to have a bastard?" Oberyn asked. "Because he has no children with the queen, uncle?" He found himself stunned, not at the audacity of the plan itself, but that this boy had managed to figure it out. Should they have ever needed to do anything about the king's children, ever needed to out them for their own ends, then it would put the Baratheon reign in a precarious position. With the Targaryen children having survived, would the realm have accepted Stannis or Renly, or would they have reached out to the dragons once more? A bastard as an heir would also not be accepted, but a bastard born of a noble lady. A bastard the king had been forced to acknowledge. With the right moves, then, House Florent could have found themselves in a very interesting position. Even if it was never needed, it was yet one more arrow they had to fire, should the need arise. And he found himself thinking on Theobald in a different light than he once had. The man, it seems, was cleverer than he'd given him credit for. "What do you intend to do with my brothers?" he asked curiously. "Kill them, Maester. What else?" Jon said, and the way he said it without emotion or doubt for a moment had him sweating. "My prince, You know what these men have cost me, what they have cost people I care about," Jon said, looking to Oberyn. "How they've sat in the shadows and made decisions which have robbed me of my family. For why? Because they fear magic. It's not magic. They should fear Marwyn. No, they should fear retribution," he said, and while uncomfortable, he nodded his head, agreeing with the boy. "Tell me about your talks with my father," Jon asked, then he was glad of the change of subject. "Many years ago, your father wrote to me, searching for what he could find on dragon eggs, on the prophecies of the prince that was promised, on the untold history of your family, and of Summerhall. I know of Summerhall. I know what they did. It was them, was it not?" Jon said, and he nodded. "I believe so. There is a woman, an old woman. She came to me many years ago, and then again but a few. Her name is Maya Rivers, and her father was..." Eking Aenworthy, Jon said, surprising both him and Oberyn. You know of her? He asked. I met her sister and her brother, though only one in this world physically. Jon said, and he looked at the boy even more curiously now. Physically? What do you know of wargs and greenseers? Of dragon dreams? Jon asked, and he almost ran to the boy to touch him and make sure he was real. You know of these things? I am these things, Maester. He sat down as Jon told him of things he had only read about, things he couldn't fully understand how he was able to do. He looked on when the boy warged into the White Wolf, when the wolf licked his hand and shook his head to the questions and nodded when appropriate, and then just when he thought he had seen it all, Jon showed him the glass candles. I'm not strong enough to use them fully yet, magically or physically, and I think the magic needs to be restored if you use them too much. But I have seen the past, the present, and I know someone who's seen the future. Jon said, taking the glass candle out and placing it on the table along with 3 others. You can light them? He asked eagerly and watched as Jon picked the black one up and then, one by one, lit the others in order. He looked on as they saw a silver-haired girl stand with a beautiful woman and a man with a scarred face, fires burning in the background. As he saw children playing in the orchard outside chasing after wolves, he saw sparring and men preparing for the tourney, and a young blonde girl laughing as she and a young blonde boy looked on. He saw Maya on a small hill, sitting by a fire, looking younger than he had seen her, before she changed to an older woman in front of his eyes. Then there was nothing, and both he and Oberyn looked to Jon. That was now. I dare not look into the past just yet, dare not try to see what I wish to most of all. Your mother, Oberyn asked. My family, Jon said. That woman at the end, that was Maya Rivers. But you say this was now? Was. She couldn't have made it there by now. She was in Old Town even after I left, he said. And Jon looked at him. Tell me what she told you. All of it? He was tired by the time he went back to his room. Even though the night was just falling, he was tired. He had talked for what felt like hours, told Jon and Oberyn things he'd not told anyone before and had been surprised. The boy seemed unfazed by any of it. He just listened and accepted, and he found him to be perplexing, interesting, but perplexing, and he knew he needed to learn more about the prince. Highgarden 2095 AC. Mid. Robert had caught him unawares. He'd been so focused on Sansa that he'd not thought he'd have asked him about another of his children. Given how the prince had behaved at the feast and then in the gardens, he'd been both appalled and relieved that it would allow him to deny the betrothal without an argument. Not that he wasn't ready for one, using Sansa's age, Cat's overstepping of bounds, and even what he'd been told about the boy as his excuse, he'd been ready. Then he'd been completely blindsided, and he didn't know what to do about it. How would this make Jon feel? Would he think him betraying him? Going against his wishes? Would he think him in league with Robert still? He was walking to his nephew's rooms to explain it to him, when he saw his old friend walking towards him, and he knew he'd need to speak to him now. Holland, I was going to speak to Jon, but maybe we could talk. I'd like that besides. It seems he's busy anyway, Howland said, and they walked back towards his own room. I'm surprised to see you at a tourney, Howland. You want to talk, Ned? Howland said, with a chuckle. I thought it a good chance to see my family again, Sansa being fostered here, and knowing that Jon would come. Then, finding out that Robb was here too, I was even more glad for it. I, Judge and Amir, wished to come to see Jon and Loras again. And I don't know, something made me wish to come. Something is in the air, Ned. It feels like Harrenhal, he said softly. Aye, but right, as if this was how it should have been. Howland said when they reached his room. Taking a seat, he waited, expecting to hear Howland raise up. How he'd not lived up to his sister's promise. But his old friend just sat there, looking at him before he finally spoke. I was furious at you for the longest time, you know that. So long, in fact, that I almost forgot that we were close once. Howland said, I know. Why? I thought it was for Jon. Really, I did. I thought it was him. I was protecting. I never saw it at Howland. Cat. I never saw it at, had Jaime Lannister of all people not come. Gods, I don't know, he said, shaking his head. Look at him, at what he's done for himself, for his family, for the North. I wished for him to go join the Watch. Thought it a noble calling, an honorable life. I was a fool. And now? Howland asked. A lesser one, he said, and they both chuckled. He's the best of both of them, Ned. But he needs us. In the years to come, he'll need us. Have you talked with him properly of the things he's done, the things he's learned? What things? Speak to him, just the two of you. Show him you're his uncle, and that you'll always be there for him. Is that the real reason you came? He asked. I came to see my king, Howland said, smiling. Our king, he said, and Howland nodded. They spoke a bit on their children, and he remarked how Josian seemed almost a different lad than he had been at Winterfell, something his old friend seemed most pleased about. When he told him of Robert and the betrothal, it was strange, his reaction far different than he'd expected. Even later, as he walked to meet with Wyman before the feast that night, he couldn't get his head around it. Why would Jon be pleased he'd agreed to this? Lord Stark, one of Wyman's men, said when he reached his door. Is Lord Wyman inside? He is, my lord, the man said, knocking, and he walked in to find Wyman and Wylis sitting at a small table. Ned, Wyman said, moving to stand up, and he held his hand up and took a seat himself. Wyman, Wylis. I'm surprised to see you here, Ned, though I know young Robb was most pleased when he found out you'd come. Wyman said. Hey, it's been good to see him. I want to thank you, Wyman. You too, Wyman. You can't speak highly enough of his time in White Harbor and of you both, Wendell and the girls, too. We're more than happy to have him, Lord Stark. He's a good lad, Wylis said, and he nodded his agreement. At dinner the other night he brought something up to me, something that I'd like to discuss with you both. Aye, have you eaten, drank, Ned? Wyman asked. I'll not say no to an ale. Has the ice made it this far south? He asked, pleased. When Wylis poured him some ale into a mug filled with ice. Gods, if Robert ever sees this, we'll be hearing him shout about his hurt head for most of the night, he said, chuckling, which both men joined in with. So what is it you wish to discuss, Ned? A match between Robb and Winifred. Wyman. They get along well, and I'd be most pleased by it. Son, what say you? What say you? Wyman asked, turning to Wylis. I'd be more than happy to have Robb as a good son and Winifred, and he seem more than happy together, so I'm for it. We can iron out the details later, but for now we're agreed, he asked, and both Wyman and Wylis nodded. Then I'm most pleased, Wyman, most pleased indeed. As am I, Ned, Wyman said proudly. I wanted to speak to you on some other matters also. Roads for one, Ned said. You saw them too, Wyman said, and he nodded. We need to do work on our own, Ned. I'll put some coin on the table. I'm sure we can get the others to see the benefits also. Quicker trade is good. It is, before he had a chance to speak on anything else. Though there was a knock on the door, and he was surprised to see Sir Garland enter the young knight, seeming to be even more surprised to see him there. Lord Stark, Lord Wyman, Sir Wylis, Sir Garland. I came with a note from my grandmother for you, Lord Wyman. Perhaps you can share it with Lord Stark, too. Garland said, handing Wyman the note which he read before speaking. Tomorrow evening, someone will come for us. They will, before the feast, my lord. Then tell your grandmother we'll attend. I will. The note, my lord. Sir Garland asked, holding out his hand, and he watched as Wyman handed it back to the knight who walked and threw it into the open fire. My lords, he said. Then as he left, he waited until the knight had left the room and turned to Wyman, who was smiling, and he looked to him for an explanation. We're being summoned to a meeting. It seems this tourney, just like Harrenhal, has an ulterior motive. Ned, the king wishes to speak to us all. Is that not a risk? Lady Olenna says the king will ensure it is not. I don't know, Wyman, with Robert here, his men, is this not just asking for trouble? I have faith that Jon knows what he's doing, Ned. Whatever it is, we need to discuss it. Has to be important, Wyman said, and he nodded. Highgarden 2095 AC. Sansa. After the actions of the Kingsguard against Lord Geryon, and knowing that it was Jon that had warged into one of Willis's hawks, she had wished to speak to her brother. But the melee, then the rain, and then Jon's own disappearance had meant that she could not. When they arrived back at Highgarden, she had found herself, Mira Forrester, Arya, and Lyanna Mormont, all in the company of Lady Janelle, while the rain fell outside. She still wasn't completely sure what to make of the woman. While it seemed as if she was nice enough, she worried she was trying to take her mother's place, that she was trying to be Lady of Winterfell, and yet she wondered if that was really what she was doing. She seemed nice enough, and so she resolved to get to know her better, to spend some time with her, and it seems the weather wished it to be so too. Now I know, you three won't care for sewing. Lady Janelle said to giggles from Arya and Lyanna. So instead I want you all to study up on the houses of the north. Lady Mira, perhaps you can instruct these two in that. Janelle said, handing Mira a book. What of us? Mira asked. Well, I think two fine northern ladies fostering in the south may appreciate embroidery more. Am I right? Janelle asked, smiling. and both she and Mira nodded their approval. While she'd already gotten Margaery her present, she still enjoyed to sew, and given she now had a new cousin, she decided to make him a handkerchief. One with a black wolf in the center of it, she felt would be appropriate. While Mira worked silently, Lady Jonelle sat beside her, and soon she found herself talking on things with her. "You're close to your wolf, Lady Sansa, more so than even Arya or Bran. I am Jon gave us them, and he's helped me a lot with Fang," she said, and wondered how Lady Jonelle would speak on her brother. "Your brother?" she asked, and Sansa smiled. "Hey, have you met him? He's the one with the white wolf." "Ghost. I met him briefly a few years ago. He and Lord James stopped, along with the king, when he was heading to the west. He's done quite well for himself. Your father is most proud of him. Your sister, too." "As am I," she said, almost defensively. "I can see that, and rightfully so, too. The direwolf isn't just a sigil of your house, Lady Sansa. It's a gift from the old gods. Have you noticed Ghost's coloring? He's white with red eyes. Aye, same as the Weirwoods. Your brother, like you, all has been blessed by the old gods. I'm happy to see you are all so close." She found after that she listened more attentively to the things Lady Jonelle spoke of, tales of the children of the forest and the old gods, and she was almost jealous that Arya and Bran got to hear them all the time. Had she not been so happy in her fostering, she thought she'd have liked to be taught by Lady Jonelle, far better than what Septa Mordan taught her anyway. When the rain stopped, she had almost wished to not go outside, but Elle, as she had by then asked her to call her, had insisted, saying the wolves wished to see their familiars. She stopped before she went outside, though, to thank the woman, finding she could see what it was that Arya and Bran liked about her much more clearly now. "Thank you for today, Elle," she said, and she was graced with a pretty smile. "It was good to spend some time with you, Lady Sansa. I enjoyed it myself. Maybe we could speak some more while you're here," she asked, and Elle nodded. "I'd like that, Lady Sansa." "Sansa, Elle, please call me Sansa." "Sansa," Elle said, and Sansa found herself walking happily to join the others later on. The atmosphere at the feast that night was much different than it had been at the others. The king seemed in a good mood, and so did some of those there, but apart from the table she was at, it seemed to be almost forced. She, however, was happy that Margaery was sitting with them and not at the high table, her place up there taken by Garland and Lionette, and she could see how pleased Jon was to have her at their table also. Her brother was laughing with joy, Cregan, Arya, and Mira, yet she caught him every few moments, looked to Margaery and smiled, her friend blushing as she smiled back. Robb was busy talking to Winifred, and that left her to talk to Wella and Margaery, while Loras, Jojen, and Brienne discussed the girls' showing in the melee. "He looks like he swallowed something horrible," Wittla said quietly, and neither she nor Margaery needed to look to see who she was talking off. "He does good," Margaery said, and all three of them broke out laughing. They were giggling among themselves when all of a sudden they saw the man being brought in. The whole room quieting down as Sir Bots Blount was led in by two of his brothers. She and Margaery looked to the high table, and she saw the panicked look on the prince's face, and she knew then it had been him who had told the knight to do it. He who had sent the knight to attack Lord Geryon from behind. As she turned to Jon, she saw that both Margaery and he were also looking at the prince, and their expressions showed they knew so too. The king coughed loudly before standing, and she was surprised to see the man looked sober, something he hadn't been much since he'd arrived here. "My lords, my ladies, Lord Geryon," the king began as he looked to Geryon. "What happened today shamed me. It shamed the Kingsguard, Sar Barristan, if you will." All eyes in the room were on Ser Barristan as he tore the white cloak off the man who trembled in the center of the room. Folding it up, he handed it to one of the other Kingsguards, and nodded to the king. "You have dishonored yourself, Boric Blount. You are no longer a Kingsguard, and I hereby sentence you to serve your time at the wall. May you find the honor there that you sorely lacked here today. Sir Barristan, remove this man. See to it that he departs this night for the wall. Be gone, and let it be known that we will not stand for dishonor as long as I am king." Sansa looked around the room and saw some surprised looks. Lady Olenna seemed genuinely shocked by what she'd seen, and it was only when she saw the smirking man with the mustache nod at her that she wondered why did he seem so happy. Jon walked her to her room later that night, and she said it to him, saying how she found it most strange. "He's an odd fellow. I don't trust him," she said. "Why not?" "The wolves, what you said about them, Fang. Ghost didn't like him, is it? Am I wrong to think so?" she asked, confused. "No, I told you to trust them, to keep Fang close. I don't trust him either. But see how she reacts should you find yourself near the man again." "I will. Good night, Jon, she said, hugging her brother. Good night, little sister. Don't forget the race is early in the morning. Are you competing? She asked excitedly. I am. Maybe you'll make some coin, he said, and she giggled as she entered her room. Maybe she would. Hi, Garden 2095 AC. Jaime! His wife had been exuberant in her celebration that night, so much so that he was glad he wasn't competing today. He had woken up early, eager to get a start on the day, and to have a morning spar, and given how stiff his muscles were, he needed to work them out far differently than he had the previous night. As he groaned when putting on his boots, he heard his wife's laughter in the background. I fought in the melee, took a knock from more than one opponent, and went head-to-head with the strong boar, and yet you're the one who moves like he was in a fight. Was I too hard on you, my love? She said, her smile annoying at this hour in the morning. Maybe I'm getting old, he said, and she laughed some more then. Maybe you should come back to bed. I could rub it better for you. It is fine. It's the rest of me that's old, he said to more laughs. What hour is the race at? Early, before lunch, and then the early rounds of the joust. You riding today? No, thank the gods, he said, and she smirked as she walked to the crib, checking to make sure their daughter was still asleep, which she was. Are you sure you wish to spar? She asked a little more seriously as she walked over to him. I think I slept badly. The spar will loosen me up. But I like it when you're tight and coiled and ready to pounce my lion, she said, her hands reaching around to grab his arse. Don't I know it? He said, kissing her before he turned to walk from the room. He found Jon waiting when he got there. Something which had surprised him in their morning spars was that, while Jon would accept pointers from Arthur and would spar with him, he would only ever do so at his direction. Almost as if this was their time and he'd not sully it by using it with someone else without his approval. He found he liked that. It made it clear Jon valued it as much as he did. You look tired, my lord. I didn't get enough sleep last night, he said. And Jon chuckled, Don't you start. I got enough of that from my wife. I'm sure you did, Jon said, and try as he might, the little sod was too fast as he ducked out of the way of the slap he aimed at him. The spar began then, and he found himself smiling as he loosened up, laughing soon at the barbs Jon was throwing his way. Even enjoying the little creases he was able to put in Jon's forehead when mentioning his own upcoming marriage, years away though it was. By the time he'd beaten him, they were both breathing a little heavy and laughing as Arthur shook his head as he carried the water to them. You two are like children, Arthur said, handing them the water and chuckling as he sat down. Sometimes it's good to be a child, Arthur, he said, and Jon nodded. We have enough serious stuff to deal with later. Marwyn arrived yesterday. He has the rest of the names, Jon said, and he looked to him surprised he'd not called him about the maester. Why didn't you come for me? I thought you and Daisy could spend some time together, and what he had to say wasn't leading to anything happening without speaking to you, so there was no need to disturb you. Did he say anything else? Aye, he spoke of Summerhall, Jon said, and Arthur turned his head to look at them both. What did he say? That the egg came from there, my father found it there among the rubble, and that I need to speak to the woman who sent him there. It was no woman. Rhaegar got a letter from your uncle at the wall, Arthur said. Who got it from Marwyn, who got it from Maya Rivers? Jon said, and he found himself shaking his head, trying to keep up with things. Who? Maya Rivers, the ghost of High Heart, Aegon the Unlikely's bastard daughter, and Walder's great-great-aunt sometimes removed. Jon said, and Jaime looked and finally noticed the large man was not with them, though he'd assumed he'd been given the day off because of the melee. I don't understand this. My family has been steered in directions by many people, my lord, and for many reasons, be it the masters and their fears of magic, be it the gods themselves, or people thinking them acting out their will. For nearly 300 years, some presence has been pushing the Targaryens down a specific path. From the moment they left Valyria, my family's been at the whims of gods or monsters. Why? Arthur asked. So the prince that can promised can bring the dawn, Jon said. Jon? Aegon the Unworthy, Aegon the Unlikely, Jaehaerys, Rhaegar. What does that lead to? Jaime. Arthur? I don't know. Me? That's what it leads to, Jon said, and he laughed. I know, I can see how both of you are looking at me and how crazy I sound right now. How mad this seems. I didn't see it at first. It was talking with Rhaenys that made it clear. Brynden Rivers, Mayo Rivers, Gwenny's Rivers, 3 bastard children of Aegon the Unworthy and Melissa Blackwood, 3 children who possessed certain gifts, certain talents, 3 who'd play their part. Who was Jaehaerys's mother, Arthur? Betha Blackwood, Arthur said. Targaryens and Blackwoods linked for how many generations? What do you know of Summerhall? Jon? Rhaegar showed me Summerhall. I saw a dragon fly. It circled and circled, but didn't stay. And then a dragon was born, but it was not the right dragon. Who was born in Summerhall? Arthur. Your father? And then he found the egg, which became my sister. There. I don't see it all yet. I can't see it clearly. But the Blackwoods, the ghost of High Heart, Summerhall, it's all connected. I just don't know how or why. There's something missing, and I need to go to High Heart and Summerhall to find it, and then to Dragonstone. Jon, you can't Summerhall and High Heart, yes, but Dragonstone, you can't go there. Stannis, even offering him a trade deal, I can't see why he'd wish you there. Don't worry, my lord. When I go, he'll not be able to stop me. Jon, it's almost time for my sister to fly. He found himself not hungry when he got back to the keep. His appetite was gone both from the strangeness of the talk with Jon and by the knowledge that they'd be meeting later that night to discuss the future. Both he and Arthur suggested Jon not speak on what they'd discussed, and he agreed for now, though he said he'd be speaking to Margaery on it, and Jaime knew he couldn't stop that. By the time it came for the race to start, he had tried to get the memory of the morning out of his mind, tried to focus on enjoying the race itself. Seeing the competitors lined up, he found himself smirking. At least he could enjoy watching Jon ride Winter and make some coin along the way, he thought, and briefly at least found his mind clear. Highgarden 2095 AC. Margaery. She sat with her family as the race got ready to begin. Willis was almost as excited as she was. Her brother had a number of his horses in this race. One he'd gifted Renly Baratheon that the Lord was riding. But for Margaery, there was only one rider she was looking at. One horse, and as she looked down at Jon, she thought him to look so very small compared to some of the other competitors. But she found herself almost breathless when he stood up in the stirrups, when the wind caught his hair and when his jacket opened and she saw it tied to his belt. She had hoped he'd come and ask her for a favor, ask for something to give him luck, and as she saw it wave in the air, she knew now why he had not. The ribbon blew, and when he looked up, she could see that while he was making it look as if he was not looking at her, he was showing her that he cared her favor always. Your graces, my lords and ladies, we are about to enjoy a display of horsemanship, a race around Highgarden itself, with the prize of 1,000 gold dragons, and a horse of the winner's choosing, courtesy of Lord Willis Tyrell. Among the competitors in this race are Lord Renly Baratheon, the king's own brother, Prince Oberyn Martell, Sir Baelor, Hightower, Lord Mathis Rowan, Lord Patrick Mallister. She found herself drifting off, as the herald must have read every single name and could see the king become agitated as he drank yet another mug filled with wine. Get on with it, the king shouted to laughs, and then the herald nodded. And she and everyone else looked down to see the 2 men raise the flags, and then it began. She looked on eagerly as the horses began to run, trying and failing to see Jon amongst the now grouped-together competitors. Looking on as they finally disappeared from her sight, she laughed to herself when she realized they were all, essentially sitting there, looking at nothing. Something which created an uncomfortable silence, and soon had her father speaking to one of the servants, hurriedly. And then, after a few moments, they were entertained by the worst fools ever. Father should have listened to me, Lorzied, from beside her. Why? I told him the way he should have done this. This wasn't it. Then how? She asked curiously as one of the fools tripped the other to stifled laughs. When we were in the north, Jon and Lord Jaime had a race. They raced to a set of trees a half-mile away and turned around them before racing back. We could see them race off in the distance, and then when they turned, they were coming towards us. But all the way we see them ride. Logerd said, and she had to admit it, sounded far better than this. Time seemed to stretch on. The fools had already outserved any benefit of having them out there, and the crowd was bored and beginning to get very impatient. The king even more so, and she thought he was about to say something when she heard someone shout, "They're coming." She, like the rest of the crowd, turned to see the dust in the distance. She could make out horses, but couldn't see who it was, and she closed her eyes, praying Jon was safe, that he'd not fallen or had an accident, something Loras must have picked up on. You've no need to worry, sis. Jon is the best horseman out there. He and Winter are unbeatable. Did you bet on him? She asked, and her brother laughed. Of course I did. She was smiling when she heard it. Joy's excited yell of Jon's name focusing her attention more clearly on the race. Winter wasn't just winning, she was so far ahead, it was as if the other horses weren't moving. The dust she had seen earlier was from those who were chasing, those who were running their own race, because as the Starks began to cheer, as Joy and the Lannisters began to cheer, she too rose to her feet, to cheer for Jon. As he crossed the finish line, she saw the smile on his face, and the favor on his belt, and found herself smiling just as broadly as he was. "I told you," Rhaegar said, and then she heard the king. "Ned, did you see that? By the gods, I've not seen anyone right as your boy does." "Ah, a well-earned win, your grace," Ned Stark said, smiling proudly. She wanted nothing more than to go to him and help him celebrate, and looked on jealously as Sansa, her siblings, and Joy and Cregan did so. She was glad Loras stayed with her, and by the time the last competitor had finished, Jon was standing in front of the stands, taking the plaudits, something he seemed embarrassed about. They had a break for lunch before the first of the jousts began, and she managed to sneak off to meet with him, finding him in the secluded garden. "You were amazing," she said, hugging him tightly. "My lady's favor is as lucky as ever, it seems," he said, and she blushed as he held it in his hand. "I had thought to give you another," she said, and he smiled. "This one is special," he said, and she looked at him, her eyes focusing on his lips as he spoke, the lips she'd kissed and would like to kiss once again. "Your grandmother wishes me to speak to your mother," Jon said, and her eyes looked to his. "Why?" "I believe she wishes me to tell her of us. I think she may know already," he said, and she felt both panicked and eager to speak to her mother, also. "Should we go together?" she asked, and felt disappointed when he shook his head. "I think your grandmother wishes for your mother to get the measure of me, to see if she approves or not. If we both go, she may not speak so freely." "My mother likes you. She will approve," she said determinedly, and he smiled. "I will make it my mission to see she does, my lady." He bowed, and she slapped him on the shoulder. "Jen," she said, giggling. "Morger," he said, joining her. She felt his hand take hers and pull her close, and he leaned forward, her eyes closing as she felt his lips on hers. She could feel his breathing was as shaky as her own, and the kiss seemed to last forever, both of them breathless when it ended. "Forgive me," he said, blushing. "Only if you promise to do that again." "I promise to do so often, just Marguerite," he said, and she kissed him herself, this time. "Then I shall hold you to your promise. Just Jon." He walked her back to the keep, close to her, but nothing that wouldn't seem like two people who'd just met and happened to be walking in the same direction. She walked to her rooms while Jon headed to speak to her mother before the joust began. She was walking down the corridor when she saw him, smelt him actually, the mint lingering in the air, proving he'd been there for some time. "Lady Marjorie, I'm so glad I bumped into you," Lord Baelish said, and she smiled and schooled her features, knowing this wasn't just a chance encounter. "It's good to see you, Lord Baxley. Is there something I can help you with?" "I come carrying some correspondence, my lady. Our prince feels terrible about how he's behaved and is rightfully full of apology and remorse." "As any prince would be, my lord," she said as he handed her the letter. "Of course, but perhaps after reading what Prince Joffrey has to say, you'll see it in your way to see his actions in a different light." The lord said, his grinning face beginning to annoy her. What light could threatening a girl with a knife be seen other than an unfavorable one? "My lord, let alone the insult to myself. His grace was under a tremendous amount of worry, my lady. Seeing those wolves so close to your person, the fear of the possibilities caused an overreaction that has been misconstrued. And calling me a lying bitch, my lord, is that to be blamed on the wolves too? It is not, my lady, however. I'm sure the prince's apology is genuine, and no doubt the influence of a fine lady such as yourself can only serve to ensure such events never happen again. I thank you, my lord. I shall, of course, give his grace's letter every consideration it deserves." "I ask no more, my lady. A fine race, was it not?" he said, smirking, even more now. "It was indeed, my lord, a worthy victor." "Indeed, a most talented man is young Jon Snow. Most talented, not content with opening mines and building ships. It seems even horsemanship is something he excels at. Some people excel, my lord. Others do not. Till your words have not been spoken, my lady, I shall leave you to ready yourself for the joust. Perhaps we'll see the young man excel there. Though really a boy of his age shouldn't compete. One never knows what may happen." Lord Baron said, and she found herself rushing to her room. Once inside, she threw the letter on her desk and found her breathing coming short. She sat down and began to feel faint. Feel the tears in her eyes, her worry overcoming her. She reached for some water and knocked the mug with her hand. watching as it fell to the ground and smashed, her guard quickly running into the room at the sound. "My lady, are you well?" "My grandmother, please fetch my grandmother. I am well, but please ask her to come," she said, and the guard nodded as she tried to catch her breath. She grabbed another mug and filled it, and then drank it down so quickly she felt it drip down her chin onto her dress, one thought in her head overriding all others. "Willis," she said softly. "Highgarden 2095 AC. Oxley." She had been asked to host a tea she more than wished to attend. Her good mother, her sister, Prince Oberyn's paramour, Lady Dacey, and her mother and Lady Jaina's, knowing that all of them knew of Jon Snow's true name, making her even more excited for it, even more eager this day to hurry along. The horse race was not as exciting as she'd have wished for, and she couldn't but agree that Mace should have listened to their sons. Both Garland and Willis had said it would be so, and Loras had even suggested a different route. The idea of the race around Highgarden, though too good for her husband to see past, in the end, they'd sat and waited, and only for the fact that Jon had won it would have been a pointless exercise. Of the first 6 horses, 4 had been bred by Willis, including Jon's horse, Winter, and when Mace had heard that he had soon been speaking up their son's achievements, she had cried off the public lunch after the race, feeling the need to get changed, and as she finished and was heading back, Paula knocked to tell her she had a visitor, that Jon had come to see her. "Send him in, Paola," she said, and took a seat while she waited. "My lady, forgive me. I didn't wish to intrude," Jon said, and she wondered where the White Wolf was. "Your friend not with you, Jon?" she said with a soft smile. "Ghost is with his siblings, my lady. Having them all here, they are most eager to spend time together before they part, and it's safer having them in numbers." "Safer? Given what happened with the prince, I worry someone may wish to gain favor by harming one of them," he said, shocking her. "What did you wish to speak to me of, Jon?" "I think we know that's not my name, my lady." "Indeed. I ask your forgiveness, my lady, in not telling you. I meant no disrespect or slight. I wasn't sure who I should and should not tell, and I feel now I erred in not telling you sooner," he said, and she was surprised by how chided he sounded. "I understand, Jon, you prefer Jon. I think it's best for now, my lady." "I understand, Jon. I'm not one who cares for politics. I understand it's needed, and my good mother revels in playing this Game of Thrones. I do not. I wish for only one thing. Do you know what that is, Jon?" "For your children to be happy," he said, and she smiled. "Indeed, my Loras thinks very highly of you, as does my Margaery. I believe you feel the same, do you not?" "Loras is my best friend, my lady. He is someone I trust, someone I would do anything to protect. And Margaery, I wish her to be my wife, my lady, to be my queen." "Olenna has told me such, and were I to refuse my permission," she asked curiously. "My feelings for Margaery are true, my lady. I would not seek another, but I would not wish to go against her family's wishes either. While I would want the choice to be hers alone, this is not the world we live in. Should I not have your approval, then I would be forced to accept it." "You give up much too easily, Jon Snow," she said, chuckling. "I never said I'd give up my lady, only that I'd be forced to accept it. I would do everything in my power to show you that your refusal was a mistake, that my feelings, that Margaery's feelings are what's most important." "I wish my daughter to be happy, Jon. Can you promise me that?" "I promise that I'll never dishonor her, nor disrespect her, nor love another, my lady. For me, there is just Margaery." "As for her, there is just Jon," she said, laughing. "You know of that?" he said, blushing. "I am a mother, Jon. I know of my daughter's heart. I care not for the crown. Oh, I can see why Robert is a bad king, and why his son would be a terrible one. But I care not for it. My daughter being queen is my husband's dream. My good mother's, all I wish for is for her life to be happy, and I believe you'll make her happy. You have my blessing, Jon, and my support." "I thank you, my lady," Jon said, his smile beaming. "Now, if you'll escort me, I believe we have a joust to attend to." The joust was the early rounds, and it was dull. She found most jousts were, she loved the pageantry, loved the balls and feasts, though they could go on, and she particularly looked forward to Margaery's name day itself. But the joust, the riding down the tilt, the crashing of lances, she found not to her taste. She was happy when the day came to an end, eager to get to the tea with the ladies, and now even more so after speaking to Jon. That he had her daughter's affections was clear. It had been clear from King's Landing. Clear perhaps from before that, as she remembered the presents he sent Margaery and how she reacted to them, that he shared them, felt them too, was even more clear to her now. She worried about the fight to come, about war and what it may mean, But what she didn't worry about was Jon. Of him she had no doubt. He would be a fine husband for her girl, one she was more than happy to call a good son, one day. Sitting in the room she watched as they came in, each of them ladies she'd spoken to, but briefly, each of them powerful in their own right. As they sat, they looked to her and to her good mother who had joined them, and she found herself eager to begin, eager to speak on plans for the future, to speak to ladies who would help to shape the realm. "Ladies, shall we have tea?" she said, and smiled at the nods. Highgarden 2095 AC. Jon. Marwyn had sent his mind in a million directions, the things he said forcing him down into thoughts he wasn't sure were his own. When he'd gone, he had lain down on the bed and went looking for her, went searching, and was glad he'd not taken her advice. Glad he was tired as it was, Rhaenys he sought and not Rhaenys. He had found her on the cliffs. She was walking down a rocky staircase towards a cove, the sea out in the bay, leaving the sand uncovered. "You are troubled, little brother," Rhaen said. "More than troubled." "Why?" "Who are we, Rhae?" "We are dragons, little brother," Rhaegar said, smiling, and he reached out and took her hand in his. He looked at her, her dark hair, her purple eyes, the woman she would have been, the woman she should have been. "We are pawns, big sister, pawns in a game. It's all we've ever been," he said, and she looked at him smiling. "You've only just realized that," she said, and he laughed. "There are two games, little brother, the Game of Thrones and the Game of Life. Both have the same rule. You win or you die. And you will win, little brother. You will win for all of us." "How can you know this?" "How can you not?" she said, looking at him, and he felt her hands on his face. "Our family is you. Jaeger's, you're the end of our line. You're the meaning of it all. What it's been leading up to. Don't you see that?" "I don't understand, Rhae. I don't understand any of this. Daddy's dreamed, and we came here. Aegon wished, and we conquered. Have you ever asked yourself why, little brother?" "No," he said honestly. "We needed to be here. We needed to unite the Seven Kingdoms. Only a dragon can rule Jayak. Only a true dragon can bring the dawn. You are the prince that was promised. Everything that happened has led to you. Can't you see?" "You're saying it's my fault, that I'm the reason? If so, then it's not worth it. It's never been worth it," he said, shaking his head. The slap was hard and heavy, and his sister's anger clear. "How dare you? How dare you think so? You're worth it. You're worth it all. Everything. Anything. You're worth it. Don't ever speak like that again. Don't ever say that to me again," she said, her tears falling. "Rosie! No, Jay, whatever it took for you to be in this world, it's worth it. Whatever the cost, if I knew I'd have gladly paid it. I don't know what it is you're to do. I don't have all the answers, but look at me, little brother. You are worth the price. Do you hear me? You are worth any price," she said, taking him in his arms as he sobbed on her shoulders. How long he stood there for, he wasn't sure, but stand he did, and eventually he looked at her and leaned forward to kiss her cheek. "I love you, big sister. I love you too, little brother," she said, hugging him tightly. It had been still dark when he woke, and he had ended up going to the library. He and Ghost and Joris, he had looked and been happy to find the books on his family, and he had read them eagerly. It didn't take long to see the pattern. Blackwoods and Targaryens linked by blood, and it would seem by magic too. His line went directly to a Blackwood by blood, and he was connected to them magically, to Nanan, to Bloodraven, and to Maya Rivers. Blood and magic, fire and blood, there was more, but he couldn't figure it out. Summerhole was the work of the Maesters, but something else had happened there, something different, and he needed to find out what. So he had spoken to Jaime, to Arthur. He had read up more and spoken to Marwyn some more, but still, he couldn't get to it. He had been tempted to use the glass candles, to look at it, but it drained him. It tired him, and he had a race to prepare for, and so he had done that instead. It was while warding into winter, while beating the others, he had felt something at the edge of his mind, a presence trying to get in, and it had almost cost him the race. His eyes closed as he tried to reach out to it. "Sing the song, young prince." "What song?" "Sing the song for me, and I'll tell you what I can. My time is near done. Sing me the song so I can be happy one last time." "What song?" "The song of my daughter, Jenny's song." Later, as he walked to the meeting, his mind was in turmoil. Ghost stood at one end of the hall, and Habus guards at the other. He had warged into mice and checked the rooms, finding Littlefinger laying in his and Robert with a whore in his own. Joffrey was whining to his mother, and their guards were busy. As he entered the room, he looked around as they stood to their feet. "Please take your seats," he said. His uncles and his aunts, Lady Olenna, Lord Jaime and Lady Dacey, Lady May, Jared, Lord Howland, and Lord Wyman, Sir Richard, and Sir Barristan, who was wearing a grey cloak which he found amusing. Lady Jaina, Lord Gerriod, and Lord Cavan, and sitting in the corner looking at him worriedly was Marguerite, and he wished to go her, but saw that Loras held her hand. Many years ago, at a tourney, my father wished to depose a bad king. Lord Viserys, finding out and for his own reasons, told my grandfather, and the realm suffered because of it. I am here because of that tourney, but there are those who are not. I ask that we bow our heads and remember the fallen. Remember those who would have been here, those who should have been here, he said, and he bowed his head. He pictured her dark hair and her smile, his silver hair as he played the harp. He pictured her holding a babe, his silver hair barely showing, and he pictured a girl playing with a black cat. Rhaenys may be right, but he didn't need to be happy about it. He didn't need to not feel the sadness he felt at them not being here. Nor could he ignore the part of him that felt him a bad substitute for them all, for any of them. Marwyn has given me the names of the Meisters involved, the ones at the Citadel and the ones in houses throughout the realm. You have all of them, your grace? His uncle Ned asked. I do. 2 have already been dealt with, he said. And Lord Wyman looked to him. How, your grace? They were killed, my lord, Cadyat spent years poisoning Prince Doran and Princess Aya amongst his other crimes. Craislin's crimes were even more heinous. As for the others, Lady Jenna, if you would, he said, and smiled when she spoke. The Maesters are responsible for so much evil that it's hard to know where to begin. They've fostered hatred between houses. They've steered houses down the path of their choosing, regardless of the consequences or cost to that house, she said, looking to Ned, and then him. But they have spent most of their existence trying to end House Targaryen. How? Lady Mage asked. Jon? Janna asked, and he nodded. In many different ways, but the worst of them were visited upon Queen Rhaexa. Janna said, and he interrupted. My grandmother had 3 miscarriages, 3 stillborn babes, and 2 who died within a year of being born. None of these were natural events, he said, and heard the gasp from Mage and his uncle Ned. Jon, I'm sorry, his uncle said, and he nodded. I wish I could wait and deal with them, that I could try them and see justice done. I wish that I didn't seek vengeance, but my blood calls out for it, and even did it, not these men are too dangerous to be allowed to live. You mean to kill them? Holland asked. I see no other choice, but I bring it to you all. I think this is right. This is just, and this is the safest course of action. Is there any here who think me wrong? I don't hold with killing men without a trial. Lord Cavan said, but when I heard what Creallan did, what he cost my family, never have I been so glad a man was already dead. These men didn't just seek to harm the Targaryens. This is not just Jon's vengeance. It is mine too. Ned? Howland said, looking to his uncle, they killed my mother. Let them face the vengeance of the old gods. I say aye, Lord Wyman said. And one by one, they agreed, until it got to Olenna. How do we do this? She asked. Richard and I have come up with a plan. It'll take some time to put in place, but it will work. I give you my word on that. My lady, he said, and she nodded. I don't doubt it, your grace. With the Masters dealt with it, fell to speak to Robert, and here he found himself surprised by what his uncle Ned told him. He did what? He asked after his uncle had told them. He never offered the betrothal for Sansa, Jon. He instead offered one for Bran and Myrcella. His uncle said shakily, and he began to laugh. Jon? Jaime asked. How does Robert come up with a better plan than us? He said, chuckling. Jon? Gerrion asked. Lady Jaina, when we spoke on Myrcella and Tommen, you asked me what our plans for them were. At the time we had none. Does having her married to my cousin and giving them a keep of their own work for you? You would keep the betrothal, Ned asked. What are your plans for Bran, uncle? He's to be squire to the Blackfish. And then I had thought of Mocalan or Sea Dragon Point. What about River Run? Gerrion asked, and all heads turned to him. My lord, Jon said, House Tully will not keep that land, not given what they've done. Lord Yeram, he said angrily, and found to his shock it was too late. What have they done? Ned asked. Uncle, please not now, not here. I'll speak to you on it in private, he said, and his uncle nodded. River Run, your grace, Lady Jaina asked. Would that be acceptable? He asked Jaime. As Lord Paramount? Jaime asked. No, I don't think so. We may need to name someone else. Even House Tully led by Bran may not be accepted, he said, and Jaime nodded. We can sort the particulars out later. Does it work for you to have Marcella and Brandon Stark wed? Lady Olenna said, and he was relieved to see that each of the Lannisters seemed happy and his uncle nodded, though he could see he was thinking on what Geryon had hinted at. Which brings us to Robert and to Joffrey. What of Tommen, your grace? Jaina asked. Sir Barristan, if Tommen was to squire, do you think it possible you'd be sent to be his king's guard? No, your grace. It would be Sir Ares or someone else. What if the queen insisted upon it? He said, and the knight looked at him. I can see that. I'm sure if the queen insisted on it, yes. Tommen, he's safe for now, he asked. He is your grace. Jon, I don't understand, Jaime said. When I'm knighted, I'll need a squire, will I not? He saw the smile on both Jaime's and Jaina's face. Kevin and Geryon looked to each other and nodded, and he saw Lady Olenna's smirk. You think you can get Robert to agree? Oberyn asked. I think if it's presented right, we can. And we have time to do so. Which brings us to Prince Joffrey, he said distastefully. He may not be as big a problem soon, your grace, Sir Richard said. Why? He asked. My latest whisper tells me that Robert spoke to his brother about fostering him. His brother reluctantly agreed. Roxley won't help the boy, Jaime said, and Richard chuckled. His other brother, Lord Jaime. The laughter was heard all around the room at the idea of Joffrey being sent to Dragonstone. Joffrey to be fostered by Stannis Baratheon. Even if that didn't straighten him out, it at least took him from King's Landing. My lords, my ladies, my father planned to hold a grand council to have the realm declare him to be king and to have my grandfather removed. I too would like to do so, but all in this room know that's not to be. Robert, Jon Arryn, they will not give up the throne even if the realm orders them to do so. No. So it's to be war then, Howland said, and he nodded. It is. My sister is almost ready to allow me to fly with her. Soon she and Lygaron will be too big to hide. The whispers too loud even for Sir Richard to hide. I do not know when, but we have time to prepare, and prepare we shall. My lords, I ask for your support to begin to make ready plans to take back the throne stolen from my family. You have mine, your grace. Oberyn said. You have House Tyrell, your grace. Olenna said, and Loras and then Margaery smiled at him. The North stands with you, my king, his uncle Ned said, and Howland, Majon, Wyman nodded. The West is yours, Jaime said, as did Geryon, Jenna, Kevin, and Daisy too. We stand with you now, and always, Arthur said. Now and always. Barristan and Richard said, looking at him proudly. Looking to Margaery, he smiled, which she returned, and he nodded. I am humbled, my lords, my ladies. I vow to be a better king than the last we've had. I swear to do what I can to make this realm what it should be, to make people's lives better. I swear it on fire and blood. Highgarden 2095 AC. Jon. He had wished to speak to his uncle after the meeting, but he could see there was something upsetting Margaery, and so after promising his uncle he would speak to him as soon as he finished. He had gone with Margaery and Olenna to Olenna's room. He had tried to reassure her along the way, but for whatever reason, he found that while she smiled, she never seemed to relax. Once inside the room, he took a seat and was upset to see she sat closer to her grandmother than to him, and so when he spoke, his tone was far harsher than it should have been. What's going on? He asked, and Margaery gave him a startled look, which made him shrink back in his chair. Margaery, please, what is it? He asked, far softer this time. Are you competing in the joust? She asked nervously. I am. Me and Loras both. Why? And if I asked you not to, she said, and he looked at her. Not sure why she was looking so scared. I don't understand. Why would you not wish me to compete? Littlefinger? Olenna said, making him turn to look at her. My lady? Lord Bogyach met me outside my room. What he said, Jon, how he said it. I think he planned something against you in the joust. Margaery said. What did he say? Jon said, and tried to keep his anger in check. Thankfully, it was Olenna who spoke. He tried to suggest he was bringing this. Olenna said, holding up a piece of paper and handing it to him. From that spoiled prince as an apology, that we were all mistaken, and he's not a sadistic little shit, but a hero trying to protect my granddaughter. Olenna said with a snort. And about the joust, that perhaps given your age you shouldn't compete, that one never knows what may happen. Olenna said, and Jon calmed himself before going over to Margaery and kneeling down in front of her chair. Margaery, he took her hand and looked up at her. He can't influence the joust in any way. The draw we can change who does it at the last moment. So he has no influence. I can have him watched so he doesn't get to speak to whoever I would face. I don't want you to compete, Jon, she said, looking at him, and he looked to Olenna, who nodded before he took her in his arms. Do you trust me? He whispered. You know I do. I promise I'll be well. I need to do this Margaret to be seen to do this Loras does too. But I swear it, we'll both be unharmed. If I even think for a moment that there is some danger, I'll cheat, he said, and she moved from his arms, looking at him. Cheat? She asked. I'll warg into my opponent's horse, have them ride away, he said, and she smirked. You can do that? Of course I can, if I even for a moment think myself or Loras are in any danger, then prepare to laugh, he said. And she smiled more true now. I mean, what could be funnier than seeing a horse suddenly run off in a completely different direction, he said, and finally got a laugh. Promise me you won't take any risks, she asked. I promise. He hugged her again and rose to his feet. Walking over to the table and handing Olenna back the note, he never even bothered to read it, knowing that it wasn't Joffrey who wrote it. Looking at the woman, he mouthed that they'd speak later and walked back over to Margaery. I think it's time we went to our beds, Olenna said, and he nodded. I need to speak to my uncle. Can we meet before you break your fast on the morrow? He said to Margaery, who nodded eagerly. Lady Olenna, Margaery, he said, then as he walked from the room. As soon as he rounded the corridor, he moved his fingers from his palm, surprised to see there was no blood there, as he'd been pressing them hard against it as he spoke. He closed his eyes, and he breathed deeply and reached out for Ghost. The White Wolf was hunting with some of the pack. Grey Wind, Lachia, and Nymeria with him, while Dusk, Summer, and Fang slept in their rooms. Protect the pack, he whispered, and felt the White Wolf give him his agreement, and he knew he'd go to Margaery's room when he returned. Jon, Arthur asked, and he shook his head to suggest there was nothing to worry about. We need to speak to my uncle. I'll explain this later, he said, and Arthur nodded as they walked to his uncle's room. Littlefinger hadn't threatened him. He doubted he was even making such a threat to Margaery. What he had done, though, was scare her. He'd hit upon a fear she would no doubt have. Given Welles's injury, she and her family would be concerned about Loras competing. Him too, and Littlefinger had managed to hit that nerve. The question was why. He knew how the man felt about him. He'd arranged for him to be killed once already, but he doubted he'd make a move here. It was too hard to control. To fix the lists and then find an opponent you were sure to face was much too difficult. He could try something with Winter or his equipment, but Jon would know if he had, so no, he wasn't actually trying to hurt him. More, he was playing on Margaery's fear, and it was then that it hit him. He knew of them, or he suspected at least, and he thought then of what Olenna had said, and felt a fool. As he reached his uncle's room and knocked on the door, though he shook that from his head, he had plenty of time to deal with Littlefinger, and he suspected it would be far easier than what he was about to do anyway. Jon? Uncle, he said, walking into the room. He could see his uncle looking at him both eagerly and with a large amount of nervousness, while he himself only felt the latter. I didn't wish to tell you this, to speak to you on it. I had hoped that you'd never need to find out. This is what we spoke of in the Godswood, his uncle asked. Aye, it is. Tell me, Jon, his uncle said determinedly. He sighed as he began to tell his uncle it all. The attack in the Riverlands, how the men were Assassin and had been paid for by Edmure, and how they believed that Lady Catelyn had asked her brother to arrange it. Jon, you cannot know this. You cannot be certain of this. On this, no. On what happened in the West, though there is no doubt. Jon? He told him then of Bronn, of Richard watching Littlefinger, of seeing Lady Catelyn and him together, and of hearing of the plan being made. How Richard had arranged for it to be their man who was hired, and how Littlefinger had used one of his brothel managers to act as the go-between. When he explained the mummery and the reason behind it, how Edmure had shown his pleasure and raised a toast to his death, he saw his uncle's expression quickly change. How have you let them live? Gods, Jon. I'm sorry, his uncle said, shaking his head. You have nothing to be sorry about, uncle. She is my wife, Jon. She is my wife, and I... Uncle, how can you be so calm about this? How are you not screaming it out loud? We've just ordered the deaths of how many men? Why are you not doing the same here? Littlefinger, Edmure, Cat, Jon, his uncle said, and while there was anger in his voice, there was hurt and confusion too. For 300 years, people have plotted to kill my family, uncle. They've sought to end our line, a line which, as of now, is me, an aunt who is somewhere in Essos, An aged uncle stuck at a wall of ice and a sister who's somehow a dragon. For 300 years, my family has been killed off, manipulated, drawn into wars, and conspired against. Even now, I don't know the full extent of what was the Maester's fault and what was our own hubris. Jon, you think I've not thought it? I've not thought of taking Littlefinger and seeing him fall, of bringing River Run and House Tully to the ground. I'm a dragon uncle. Of course I've thought of it. Then why have you not? Because I'm not only a dragon, I'm a wolf too. Littlefinger will pay when it serves me best. Edmure will pay when it serves me best. And Cat, his uncle asked worriedly, is the mother of my brothers, the mother of my sisters? If I hurt her, then I hurt them, and while it may be unavoidable, I'm trying, uncle. I'm trying, he said, as he shook his head. I'm trying to think of how it could be. They sat in silence for a few moments afterward, neither knowing what to say and neither wishing to be first to speak. In the end, it was his uncle who did so. They can't know, his uncle said. I know. A part of me wants to ride to River Run, to drag them both out and take their damn heads myself. You can't, uncle, should you see her. You can't speak of this. I know, you wish me to be a wolf, his uncle said, looking to him. You are a wolf, uncle. He got up from his chair and walked over, placing his hand on his uncle's shoulder. Feeling his uncle's hand reach out and touch his own, and after nodding, he turned to walk to the door. You shouldn't have had to face this, Jon. This life, it shouldn't have been the one you had. It's the only one I could have had, uncle, he said, a soft smile on his face as he thought of Rhaenys words. I am here for you, Jon, always. I know, I'm most grateful for it, uncle. Good night. Good night, nephew. Highgarden 2095 AC. Jenna, she had enjoyed the tea immensely. Knowing that Lady Axery was no longer in the dark was a weight off her mind. She liked the woman and felt it wrong that she didn't know the truth. So finding out she did was something she was happy about. The tea itself had started benign enough. Soon, though, talk had turned to her niece and grandnephew, and she knew then Jaime had been right. The war had always been coming. Ladies, I'm glad you could all join me today, Ellery said. We're most happy to be invited, sister. Lanassi answered, my nephew is with his cousin being looked after by my good sisters. Laness said, and she looked to Daisy, who actually seemed relaxed to be away from Joanna, even if only for a few moments. How are you enjoying the tourney, Lady Jenna? Ellery asked. Apart from the race, I'm enjoying it very much. What's wrong? Did you bet on the wrong horse? Daisy said, chuckling, which made her chuckle too. No, only someone who's not seen Jon ride would bet against him. I mean, no offense to the rest of those riders, but only my niece could have given him a match today. Your niece? Lady Olenna asked. Joy, she's the closest I've ever seen to him. He's had her up on a horse since she was far too young for it, she said, smiling. Speaking of Jon, Lady Atsley said, I take it all here are aware of certain truths, she asked, and seemed relieved when everyone nodded. We are my lady, Daisy said. Please let's use names here. I'm all for formality when it's proper, but by the gods, if it's not a chore. Ellery said to laughs. Thank the old gods for that, Ellery. Max said to a smile from the other woman. Does everyone know of Jon and my daughter? Ellery asked, and they all nodded. They are good together. They'll be the king and queen we need. Ilaria said, better than the king and queen we have anyway. Olenna said to some chuckles, Gianna, forgive me, but your niece, her son. I don't. The other two, Marcella and Tommen, they seem a different sort. Madge asked. Cersei was always spoiled. No, that's not it. We all were. She was. She is a law unto herself. She has always thought herself above everyone else. Far above, and it seems to be something she has allowed her son to think also. There's more than that wrong with that boy. Forgive me, Genna, but you know it's true. Olenna said, I know. It was my niece he tried to attack it. Olenna, he's lucky I wasn't there at the time. Had I been, then Geryon would have been fighting for me and not a wolf, she said, laughs. Ladies, we can't do much about the crown now, but we have a chance to do something in the future. Ellery said to a surprised look from Olenna. Rosier, Olenna said. Jon Margery, you all know what they did in Flea Bottom. Jenna Lannisport, I know it's your nephews and brother who've been responsible for a lot, but is it not Non who is the reason why the small folk are doing better? He is the coin. The improvements, trade, some of it would have come without him. But Castamere, and the ships have changed it. He's doing the same with the North, Bear Island, White Harbor, even Wintertown. Maegay said, and it was her daughter who asked the question back. Daisy not having heard of the changes, it seemed. Wintertown. It's been built up. More people are moving to it. It's now a proper town, soon to be a city. That's my point, ladies. With Jon, with my daughter, they already wish to change things. I've no doubt that when they're on the throne, they will also, Amatsli said. What is your point, Allery? Olenna said grumpily. My point is, we have a chance to be influential in some of those changes. Marguerite will listen. Jon will listen. We'll have a king and queen who care. Shouldn't we care also? Shouldn't we play a role in the changing of the realm? As she walked down the corridor, she smiled. For a woman who, according to herself and to Olenna, cared not for politics, Allery had a knack for them. She'd hit on something they'd not thought of. Allery was mad. Given how he treated Rhaegar, he'd never listened to her suggestions. Robert and Cersei were different, but even if Robert would, Cersei was not someone who'd do anything to help the realm. Marguerite, though, Jon already listened to, and Jon himself. He listened. He may not take your suggestions on board, he may go a different way. But he listened, and if you were right, he accepted it. They had more than a chance of not just having a good king and queen, but of actually changing things, something which had her excited by the possibilities. Is my niece inside? She asked Hikensgard when she reached the door. Her Grace asked not to be interrupted. The dead-eyed man said. I think she'll see me, she said, leaving no room for questions, and watching as the man knocked and then walked into the room. It took a few moments for her niece to get ready, and when she was finally allowed inside the room, she could smell the wine already, her niece slurring her words when she greeted her. Aunt, it's so good to see you. I've been meaning to catch up. Have you indeed? I've come for one reason, and one reason only. Niece, and that's to tell you to get a grip on that boy of yours. Do so before others do, she said angrily. How dare you? I am your queen. You are the same spoiled little girl you've always been, and yet, despite it all, you were never unnecessarily cruel or violent. That was my niece. Your monster of a son pulled a knife on my niece, your very own cousin, and as for whichever of you put that fool blown up to what he tried to do to my brother, gods, if your father was alive to see that. Father would have taken up for Joffrey. He was in the right. That wolf scarred him. It scarred my boy. Scarred? Where is he? Let me see this scar you're so concerned about. And if you think your father would have approved of what Joffrey did, then you're further gone than I thought. Prince or no prince, your father would have punished that boy, not coddled him. All of you are in it together. I'm a Lannister too. And yet you've all left me alone. Cersei whined. Maybe if you acted a Lannister, we would not. Mark my words, Cersei. If one hair on my niece's head is harmed, one hair, if that boy of yours even looks crooked at her, then I'll show you the meaning of our words. Believe me, niece, you do not want to hear me roar. She watched as her niece huffed, and then reached for the wine glass, and she shook her head. Leaving the room, she walked further down the corridor, and hoped the fat stag was only drunk and not entertaining when she reached his rooms. Sir Barristan, is his grace presentable? She asked, and the knight smirked when he nodded. He is Lady Jenna, if you'd wait a moment. She waited until the knight retuned, and he escorted her into the room. The fat stag was drunk, yet he seemed in good spirits, and at least seemed capable of speech, which she welcomed. Your Grace, she said, biting her tongue as she curtsied to the false king. Lady Jenna, to what do I owe this pleasure? He said, meaning anything but... I was wondering, your Grace, with the joust on the morrow, if I would be allowed to escort my grandniece and nephew to it. I'm sure my children would love to meet the prince and princess, and they may have more fun sitting with other children than alone. Aye, that sounds like a good idea, Barristan. See to it that Horpanos, Myrcella, and Tommen will be accompanying Lady Jaina to the joust tomorrow. I will, your Grace. Sir Barristan said. I thank you, your Grace, she said, curtsying yet again as she turned to leave. Jon wished Tommen to be his squire, and Myrcella would be marrying Brandon Stark. It was time she paid more attention to her grandniece and nephew, and perhaps with luck she could get them to be allowed come visit the rocks too. High Garden 2095 AC. Joy. She had laughed at the others in the crowd when they had talked about who would win the race. Only apples could beat Winter, and even then, only when Jon let her win. One day she'd beat him for true. But sometimes he'd let her win, and she could have easily beat all the others. She had even asked her papa to let her race, but he wouldn't. When she had seen Jon leading, though she had cheered, and soon so had everyone else. But she had seen him first. She had known he would win. When he read her the story that night, he told her that they could have a proper race when they got back to the Rock and that he'd not cheat and let her win, and she had almost wanted to leave right then. She was missing apples and Balin, and unlike the other night, she didn't have Ghost with her tonight, though she was now no longer scared of the prince. Dusk had bitten him, and Papa had to fight to save him, and she had been so relieved and happy when he'd won, just like he and Jon promised he would. Now she was dressing for the joust, and she wondered if she'd get the flowers again. Her cousin had given her them last time, but she thought he may give them to Lady Dacey or to Joanna if he won again. Yesterday's joust had been no fun. No one she knew was riding in it, but today would have a lot. Even Jon and Loras would ride, and so she looked far more forward to going. "Do you wish your hair up, Lady Joy?" Mara asked. "Yes, please," she said, and the woman tied her hair up. "All done," Mara said a few moments later, and she looked and smiled at herself in the looking-glass before she made her way to break her fast. She stopped as she entered the room, seeing one of the men in the white cloaks. The Kingsguard standing at her table. Was Papa in trouble? Was Jon? She looked to see that Jon wasn't there. Cregan or Loras weren't there either. She was about to leave when Aunt Jenna called her over, and so, taking a breath, she walked to the table. "I am Lady Joy Hill. I'm not afraid," she said over and over to herself as she walked, and then she stopped, seeing the blonde boy and girl sitting at the table, looking at her. "Joy, this is Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen. They'll be joining us today." "Your Grace," she said first to Myrcella, and then to Tommen, curtsying to both. "Lady Joy," the princess said, smiling. Sitting down at the table, she looked to her aunt, who was smiling at her, and then to the prince and princess, who were looking at her, and she knew what she needed to do. "Will we have candied apples today, Auntie?" "Maybe." "Candied apples, yummy, princess," she said, smiling at the girl, who smiled back. "Pen nuts, too. You like pen nuts?" she said to Tommen, who looked confused before she explained how yummy pen nuts were. As she ate, she played and found the princess and prince liked to play too. She was about to stop her game when Ghost came in, and then the Kingsguard, who seemed to have been nice, moved when Tommen made a noise. "Ghost to me," she said, and the wolf walked to her as she reached her hand to the plate and grabbed a sausage. "Ghost loves sausages." Yummy, Ghost," she said to the prince and princess, as the wolf ate the sausage, and she reached for another. When Jon walked in and took his seat. "There you are, I should have known you'd run here," Jon said to Ghost, before looking at her. "Morning, Joy." "Morning, Jon, Prince and Princess Jon," she said with a smirk as she nodded her head in the direction of Myrcella and Tommen. "Forgive me, where are my manners?" Jon said, rolling his eyes at her. "Prince Tommen, Princess Myrcella in honor," Jon said, and as she leaned down to give Ghost another sausage, she giggled. "You're Jon, you won the race?" Tommen said, and Jon nodded. I did, my prince. Though it was really Winter who won. I just held on. I had to, otherwise I'd have fallen off." Jon said as Tommen and Myrcella giggled. "Is Ghost yours, Monsieur Jon?" Myrcella said, and she wondered why she called Jon Sir Jon wasn't a Sir, he was a Jon. Just a Jon. "This lazy sod. He's mine." Though truth be told, and she sat up when he began to lean in close to them and whispered, "He's anyone's as long as they feed him sausages." "Want to try?" he asked, and both the prince and princess nodded. "I don't think that's a good idea, Your Grace," the Kingsguard said to Myrcella. "I give you my word, Sir Ghost won't harm the prince or princess. I swear it on my honor," Jon said, and the Kingsguard nodded as Jon told them to grab a sausage and feed Ghost. By the time the others arrived, both the prince and princess were laughing as Ghost licked their hands when they stopped feeding him. Jon then talking to them about the day's jousting. They had finished eating, and yet no one wished to get up from the table until the others did. And she saw Jon speaking to Sansa and Arya, and then to Cregan before he and Loras stood up to leave. "Cregan will get you your pen nuts, Joy. I'll see you later, my prince, my princess," he said as he left, and she was happy that Ghost was staying with them rather than going with him. "Is Sir Jon not taking Sir Ghost with him?" Tommen said, and she shook her head. "Ghost likes pen nuts too, Tommen," she said, and he giggled. When they were done, they got ready to ride to the tourney grounds. It wasn't far, and she was glad now that Myrcella and Tommen were joining them. They arrived, and she was surprised they'd be sitting with them too. But as they took their seats, she felt excited to see the joust begin. Loras and Jon wouldn't be riding for a while, but Oberyn would. Jaime would, and she had many people to cheer on. "Pen nut, Ghost," she said, throwing the peanut to the wolf, and he gobbled it down quickly, looking to her for more. "The nut, sir, ghost," Tommen said softly a moment later, and when the wolf looked at him, he threw the peanut to him, laughing. As Ghost ate that one too. Highgarden 2095 AC. Ned. He had not slept well. No, that was a lie. He had not slept at all. Hearing what Jon had said, knowing the truth of things, had been almost more than he could take. When Jon had left, he had rushed to the privy and emptied the contents of his stomach. He had retched as he got sick, as he felt the bile in his throat. Then as he lay down on the bed, as he tried to clear his mind, he found himself unable to. He had known, deep down inside he had known. The letters, the ravens, what Luwin had said, what the Blackfish didn't, he had known. House Tully had tried to kill his nephew. They had played a role in the death of his brother and his sister too, and had he access to Dragon like his nephew did then, he'd have had no compunction about seeing River run in flames. He needed to know of the Blackfish, the truth of him. No way would he allow his son to be squired to him if he played a role in this. Though, again, deep down, he knew he had not. Still, he had taken a walk to Jon's room and had found Arthur and Walder on guard. Leaning close into the night, he had asked for a moment to speak to him. Arthur leaving Walder to guard the door, and both of them walking to a small guard reeve. Once they were sure they'd not be overheard, he had asked. "The Blackfish, is he part of it?" "No, we think he may have suspected, may even have known afterward," he argued with his nephew. "With your wife, too. But he is not a part of it, nor did he approve as far as we can tell." Arthur said, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "He wishes to squire Bran." "Jon knows this, Stark. He approves." "So you think I should allow it?" "I think the Blackfish is a good man. Out of all that family, the only one who ever was." "I didn't know," he said, shaking his head. "I know that, but you still did wrong by him. By your sister." "I know, I'm trying to make amends." "That and because you're his kin is why you still breathe, Stark," Arthur said, leaving. He was in no mood for the meal that morning, so while his children broke their fast, he sat in his room. And he may have spent the day there even with the joust to go on, if Janelle had not come to speak to him. "What's wrong, Ned?" "Many things. I wish I could speak on it, and maybe someday I can, but not today," he said, and was happy when she left it at that. "We're getting ready to leave. Can you ask Robb and Sansa to come to speak to me? I'll bring them with me, and we'll meet the rest of you there." "I can. Are you sure you're well, Ned?" she said, reaching out and touching his arm. "I am ill, thank you. We'll speak later," he said, and she nodded. He had put this off enough, too. He knew both his children wished to know why he'd set Cat aside, and he had thought to come up with something that wouldn't make them think badly of their mother. He didn't wish to drive a wedge between them, even if it seemed that Cat was doing that enough herself. Given what he now knew, he needed them to be certain of how things were. The truth, but not the full truth, he thought as his children entered the room. "Robb, Sansa, take a seat. We need to discuss your mother." To say it was difficult was an understatement. He told them of the things she said of Jon, seeing both of them look unsurprised, and he wondered, had she been saying it to them too? Sansa's letter had suggested it, but still he wondered. When he told them of the betrothal, something Robb didn't know, of how long their mother had been away from home, of what she'd said when she returned, and of the letters, though not to whom they were sent, they were shocked. "She came to me in White Harbor, and she argued against Winifred and me, said it was part of Jon's plan." Robb said, catching him by surprise. "It was the same when she was here, Jon. The Tyrells, all of them were plotting against us, all of them to take Winterfell from Robb. What she said about Jon, about the wolves." Sansa said, shaking her head, and Robb looked at her. "About the wolves?" Robb asked. "When we thought Jon had died, when we got the ravens, I was upset, and she comforted me. But later, as I slept, when I was in Fang, she wished them dead, just like she did Jon." Sansa said, and while Robb gasped at the part about Jon, he found himself thinking of the part about Fang. "When you were in Fang, you're a ward," he asked his daughter. "We all are, haven't you had wolf dreams?" "I have, but..." "I have too. But you can control it?" Robb asked eagerly. "Jon taught me how, and once you know, it's easy," Sansa said as she closed her eyes. "Fang is waiting with Grey Wind and Leia. They're at the end of the corridor playing with Jory." "Wait, you just did it?" he asked, shocked. "Aye." "Father?" Robb asked. "We can speak to Jon of it later. If he taught Sansa, then he could help us too," he said, and Robb nodded. "About your mother, I understand, Father. She's my mother still, but I understand." Roach said, and Sansa nodded. "I'm sorry," he said, and Sansa got up to hug him. "It's not you who should be father," Sansa said, and he felt himself breathe easier at that. Come, we'll be late. Your brother is competing in a joust of all things, he said to laughs from both his children. They decided to walk to the tourney grounds, the wolves running ahead of them, and as they reached it, he saw him walking towards him. A man he had no wish to see, a man he had avoided since he'd gotten here. He saw Sansa look at him strangely and then close her eyes, and he wondered if she was reaching out for her wolf. Lord Stark, Lord Robb, Lady Sansa, I'm so glad I've bumped into you. I was just heading to the tourney, Littlefinger said, and Ned felt that to be a lie. He was waiting, but whether it was for him or his children, he didn't know. He was about to push past him when the wolves arrived, and he looked on as they growled as the man began to sweat, and surprisingly, as Sansa smirked. Robb, Sansa, why don't you go to our seats? I'll be along in a moment. Yes, father, Lord Baby asked. Sansa said curtly, and then she, Robb, and the wolves walked away quickly. He looked as Littlefinger watched them leave and then turned to him, smiling. Strange animals, wolves. Pack animals, Lord Baxley. You should be wary of animals that hunt in a pack. I've seen them tear an elk to pieces in moments. Have you ever seen the size of a fully grown elk? He said, enjoying the fact the man smirked no more. I had hoped to speak to the children, Lord Stark. Lady Catelyn and I are very close. I'm sure she'd love to know what her children have been up to. Indeed, well, you've spoken to them. If my wife wishes to know of them, she can write. Cat was always very fond of writing. If I remember correctly, Littlefinger said, smirking once again. He moved quickly, his hand on his throat pushing him against the wall, and he began to squeeze, watching as the color left the man's face. Behind him, he heard swords being drawn as Jory and his guards faced off against the two that Littlefinger had brought with him. You're a funny man. A very funny man, he said, glaring at the man, as he squeezed, and then he let go, allowing the man to gather his breath. You should be careful, Lord Baelish. Some people may find your humor offensive, he said as he moved away. Stark's quick tempers, slow minds, he muttered, and Ned turned back, moving to him once again. A clever man or a man whose temper is up? Which do you fear, my lord? And think long and hard before you answer. A clever man may cause you problems, but a man with a temper will end you, he said, moving away. I'll give your wife my regards, Lord Stark. Give her what you like, Lord Baxley. I care not, he said as Laxley arrived back and looked at him, and then Littlefinger, the wolf, walking over and climbing up on the man who was now shaking, her paws either side of Littlefinger's head as she snarled at him. Law to me, he said, and heard the wolf growl once more before she was back by his side, and they walked away. Highgarden 2095 AC. The joust. Sir Barristan, he had not really had a chance to spend any time one-on-one with the king, though he had, as the meeting came to a close, had a brief moment to speak to Arthur and Jon, the king telling him that he'd find a time and place for them to meet privately before the tourney ended. Now, though he was walking to the tent and a part of him wished to talk the boy out of it, tell him no, though he was his king, and it was not his place to do so. Competing in an honor joust was one thing, competing in a tourney against knights, against some of the knights that he could face here in an open draw, was quite another. As he arrived at the tent, he nodded to Ser Swalder. The man who would be his brother one day had impressed him in the melee, and he would be proud to wear a white cloak with him. Sir Walder, Sir Barristan. Is there anyone inside? He asked, hoping Walder knew what he meant. Jon, Lorsan Ser Daberon, Ser Barristan, Walder said, as two hedge knights walked by. Inside the tent, he found both boys putting on their armor, Arthur standing there, speaking softly to the king. When they saw him, he saw Jon smile while Lors tied up the king's breastplate. Ser Barristan, it's good to see you. You too, Jon, he said, knowing it was better not to take the chance, with so many people milling around outside. I take it just like Ser Dairon you've come to ask us both not to compete. I have, Jon. I understand the wish to compete in a tourney, and while your horsemanship and I have no doubt Lorsi's is up to the task and may make you feel ready, taking a lance from each other in your practices is far different than taking one in a proper joust. Jon, which I've been trying to tell them, Arthur said as the tent opened and Jaime walked in. My lord, it seems I now have two knights telling me not to compete. Will you be joining them? Jon asked, a smirk on his face. Me, I want to face you and knock you on your arse. Jaime said, and both boys laughed. It's dangerous, Jaime, he said, and Jaime nodded. What age were you again, Barristan? Or you, Darren? I was 3 and 10 when I rode my first, and even then, it was only because I had missed the one when I was 2 and 10. Jaime said, It's different, Jaime, he said, and Jon looked at him. Forget who I am. Would you have come here for Lorzies for Barristan? Jon asked, and Barristan was ashamed to shake his head. Nobody loves me, Lorza said, getting a chuckle and an arm around his shoulder from the king. I love you, ugly though you are, Jon said, and Loras laughed. He had to admit he enjoyed the banter, were it not for the knot in his stomach and his worry over who Jon was. He'd have played a part in it himself, as it was, though he reluctantly nodded. Come, it's time to see the lists. Let's go find out who we're facing. Jon said, picking up his helm, and all 5 of them walked from the tent. It turned out he was facing a Frey, and Loras laughed, though Ser Perwyn was not a typical Frey, which he soon told them, and didn't like the excited look which then appeared on Jon's face. Loras was drawn against a hedge knight, while Jaime had drawn Lord Yan Royce, and he the Blackfish, much harder opposition than they'd expected first off. Who did I get? They heard the voice behind them as Oberyn arrived. The Red Viper, someone he hadn't known how to take. Knowing he was close to Jon had surprised him. Seeing how close, though, had soon removed any doubts of the man's intent. Cyrillin Corbray. I'm going to enjoy this, Oberyn said, making him wonder why. He's one of Littlefinger's friends, Arthur whispered in his ear. As they moved back to the tents to wait to be called, Jon walked over to him, the others walking a little distance in front, and he spoke very softly. I appreciate your worries here, but I need to do this. For me, I need to ride. I wish to. I'll not take any chances, but I want to do this. Jon said, and he saw him touching a small ribbon. Do you have someone you'd crown? He said, smiling, and he enjoyed the little blush that appeared on his king's face. Sir, I may be confident, but I'll not tempt fate, Jon said, and he chuckled, knowing that he'd already picked his queen. Then I wish you good fortune, Jon. And I, you, Sir Barristan. It was Loras who was up first, and he watched on, standing close to the king, but not too close. Jaime and Arthur standing beside Jon as his friend took the tilt in 3 rides. The boy's lance work was excellent, and his riding, though not on a par with Jon's, was pretty good too. His own ride was next, and he lined up to face his old friend, the Blackfish. A man he only respected now, even more given what his house was involved in and his own attitude towards it. Charging down the field, he saw his king look on expectantly. He heard the roar of the crowd and the lance struck home, though the Blackfish didn't move. The next tilt was the same. The lance broke, and still no movement from the Blackfish. On the 3rd, he caught him with as good a shot as he had hit, and it almost unseated him. The 4th, it seemed, would be the one, and he was right, and he looked on as Brynden got to his feet and nodded. He was unharmed. Riding back, he saw the king on his horse, and he eagerly dismounted and rushed back to see him ride, keen to see him return safely. Ardya. Jousting was not as much fun as the melee, but she had a bigger reason to cheer today, as her brother would be riding soon. She had enjoyed the ride so far. A fat knight from House Frey had fallen almost without being hit, to much laughter in the crowd. Lord Beric had beaten a Royce from the Vale. Someone her father had cheered on while seeing Loras ride and beat a bigger man had been fun. Ser Barristan against her granduncle had allowed her and Lyanna to get their own back on Bran for cheering for him during the melee. While he was family and Bran would be squiring for him, Lyanna and she had been cheering for Daisy, and hearing her brother cheer when she was beaten had annoyed them, though they knew he was right to do so. So, seeing him fall to the bold had allowed them to annoy him back. Though her stupid brother had only laughed, saying, it was the bold, the best knight in Westeros. Now, though, she moved to the edge of her seat when she saw Jon and Winter come out. The shield he held in his hand wasn't the one she'd heard about. She'd have loved to see that one here. Instead, it was just Ghost alone with no fish in his mouth. He'll beat him for sure, she said to Lyanna, as the knight from the twins rode out. What if he doesn't? She heard someone say, and she turned angrily but couldn't find who it was. Before she had a chance to really look, she turned back and the horses were riding down towards each other. The sound of the lance hitting the shield seemed even louder than it had been just the ride before. He's hurt, she heard someone say, and she looked on worriedly as Jon leaned back in his saddle, barely holding on, as Winter rode on. Jon, she shouted, and was happy, then to see him right himself, and soon they rode again. She felt her mouth dry up, her heart begin to race, and she looked on as Jon's lance hit, and then she found herself standing and cheering, as did everyone around her, when they saw the knight fall. Jon just stopped his horse and looked down to see the knight rise and nod his head. And then he looked towards them, and she found herself laughing as she sat back in her seat. I told you he'd win, she said, and she sat there smiling and looking forward to his next ride. She watched Sir Jaime beat Lord Yax in 6 rides, both men almost coming off in the 3rd and 4th, and then she felt the hush in the crowd as the Red Viper rode in. She liked the prince. He had laughed with her, he mussed her hair like Jon did, and he let his daughters fight. He was also friends with Jon, and so she cheered him on as he looked to the crowd. His horse was decked out in bright yellow, his shields, the sigil of his house, the gold spear piercing the red sun on a bright field of orange. She found she liked the colors. She liked the sun even if it made her sweat too much. As the prince rode, she wanted to see the other man fall, though. She didn't know him, but she didn't like him already, and she was glad to see him move in his horse on the first ride. She, like the rest of the crowd, were stunned on the second ride. What the prince did with his lance was unusual, and hearing the gasps, she wondered if it was even allowed. Instead of aiming at the shield, the prince aimed it at the horse. It forced the knight to pull the reins, and when he did, the lance rose to catch him in the chest, and as he flew from the horse, he landed hard on the ground. "What was that?" she said, turning to Lyanna, who looked as clueless as she was. "I don't know, but Prince Oberyn won," Lyanna said, and she looked around to see the crowd looking at the prince oddly. The knight got up and moved a little stiffly, but Oberyn was already gone, and she wondered if the man had done something to upset the prince or his daughters, or was it just how he rode. Oberyn, Carberry being one of Littlefinger's men, raised his ire. So much so that at one point he thought of aiming to do far more harm than he did. In the end, though, he decided to go for the horse, to make it look like he was being dishonorable, and for it to give him the opening he wished for. Since his lance would hit the horse first, Carberry would need to pull his reins, and as soon as he did so, Oberyn switched up, catching him flush in the chest. He would feel the pain of that for a few days at least, and when he rode back, he found Jon waiting for him. He expected to see some annoyance, some judgment. Instead, he found his nephew smiling at him. Climbing off his horse, he walked with Jon to watch on as some of the other competitors took to the field, and they were soon joined by Lord Beric and his squire. "Jon, it's good to see you again," Lord Beric said. "You too, my lord. You rode well." "I thank you, Jon. I missed your own ride, but then I missed you in the horse race by some distance also," Beric said with a chuckle. "Have you met Prince Oberyn, my lord?" "No, an honor to meet you, my prince. My betrothed and squire are also from Dor Ned." "Come over here," Beric said, and the small boy came over as Oberyn greeted the man. "Ned?" Jon asked. "Lord Edric Dane, Jon," Beric said, and Jon looked to him. "Lord Ye," Jon said, and the boy looked to him, and then Jon, and seemed nervous. "Lord Jon, my prince," Ned stammered. "No, Lord Dane, though Prince Oberyn really is a prince," Jon said with a smile on his face, which seemed to put the boy at ease. "I'm sorry, Jon," Ned said, and Jon's smile was even broader now, and so the boy relaxed even more. "My lord, my prince, if you'll excuse me, Ned, I wonder if I could speak to you a moment about your uncle and his sword," Jon asked, and Ned looked eagerly to Beric, who nodded. Watching them both walk away, he was left with Lord Beric, and he wondered if Jon was talking Ned about Cregan, and had the boys seen him, or Arthur, and did he even know of them? He was about to follow when Lord Beric began to speak, and he found himself laughing with the man until Jon came back with Ned, the young man seeming far more comfortable with his nephew now. "It seems the next round is to be posted soon, Jon. Prince Oberyn, perhaps. We could speak later," Beric said. "I'd like that, my lord. Young Ned, you're a credit to your house, and it's a true pleasure to meet a fellow Dornishman here," he said, and the boy looked to him as if he'd given him dawn itself. "My prince," he said as he walked away after his lord. "Interesting man, Lord Beric," he said as he and Jon walked. "Most interesting. Stormlands Lord. Most interesting indeed," Jon said, and he chuckled. "And here I thought you were just being friendly." "Oh, I was my prince," Jon said, and he laughed properly now. He shuddered when he saw the list, and then he laughed at both the excitement on Jon's face and the jealousy on Loris's. Both boys had drawn Kingsguard, but Loris had drawn Sirius Oakheart, while Jon had drawn the Bold. As for him, it seemed he and Lord Beric would be getting reacquainted much sooner than he'd have liked, and Jaime was to face Lord Renly. "The Bold, you got the Bold," Lorzy had, and Jon laughed. "Want to swap Loris? Can we?" Lorzy asked before he realized he was being japed. "No. I hate you," Loris said, chuckling. He was up first, and so he wished them both luck and mounted, ready to face Lord Beric. It only took 2 lances, and he unseated him easily, though he rode it fair and used no tricks, and the lord took it in good spirits and was thankfully unharmed. He made his way back and walked up to Reddard, who was looking on as Jon rode out. "I met your nephew," he whispered. Jon spoke to him. I kept my helm on, but he invited him to the rock. Is that a good idea? I don't know, but my sister is to marry the man he squires for, and he's bound to see Cregan here. It may be for the best. It may. Oberyn said. As for this, he said, looking out as Barristan and Jon faced off. Reckless, Arthur said, annoyed. Brave, he said, with a smirk. Marjorie, between her grandmother and Jon, they had calmed her down some, reassured her, and as she had gone to her room that night and dressed for bed, she had been feeling a little better. When she heard the scratching at her door, she had thought it to be Fang, and she found herself smiling when she opened it, and it was Ghost that walked in, the White Wolf looking to her before moving to her bed. She had thought it was Jon warding, but even finding out it had not been, that it was just him having sent Ghost to comfort her, she had been more than happy and so had snuggled comfortably beside the wolf that night. Jon had come to her room early the next morning to fetch the wolf and to once again reassure her, even going so far as to tell her if he didn't compete. How could he crown her? I don't need a crown if it puts you at risk, Jon, she said, and he leaned in and softly kissed her lips. The kiss far too short, but understandable given where they were. I would not put myself at any more risk than necessary. I promise Marjorie, both I and Loras will be safe. I'd not see you hurt by allowing myself to be. The first few jousts had her calming down some more. She saw each competitor rise after they had been unseated, and so she felt her nerves gradually recede, though she was not the only one to look on nervously when Loras rode. He did so excellently, and she, along with her brothers and father and mother, cheered, while her grandmother smiled, a small, proud smile. When it was Jon's turn, though, she felt her nerves rise again, and as the two lances crashed, she saw him move so far back in the saddle that she had thought him lost, and she would have been happy if he'd not rode again. Though even through her nerves she felt a little swell of pride when he righted himself for the second tilt. Seeing him knock Sir Perwyn from his saddle, she rose to her feet cheering. Thankfully so did pretty much everyone, so she didn't look out of place. That was an excellent ride, Willis said beside her, and she felt her brother grab her hand. It was most excellent, she said, smiling. She heard Willis's chuckle while others practically hissed at Oberyn's ride, and she wondered why Oberyn seemed to be riding dishonorably, only to see it be a mummery and to watch him win. By the time it came around for Oberyn's second ride, the news had reached them of the draw. Loras was to ride against a Kingsguard, and she knew her brother would love that. But it was knowing Jon was to ride against the Bold which had her calming down, almost fully. When the time came and she looked out as the two of them faced each other, she knew that the Bold would be honorable. He would be fair. So now the danger that Jon faced was the normal danger one would in a joust. And while that was still much, it was far lesser than against someone wishing you harm. Barristan's horse was decked out in the colors of the Kingsguard, the white barding tinged with the 3 stalks of wheat, to signify his house. Winter, on the other hand, was completely bare, but for the saddle, and she felt her heart in her mouth as they rode towards one another. The crashing of the lances had her closing her eyes, and when she opened them, she saw that both had hit home, but Jon remained seated still. She felt more comfortable with the next one, and she thought she saw Barristan move a little, but she wasn't sure. By the third, she was watching eagerly, the lances practically smashing as they broke against the shields. She could hear the king sing Jon's praises, and the crowd too seeming surprised. With the 4th tilt, she saw Jon move in his saddle and putting everything he had into the thrust. And then Winter was riderless. Jon seemed to almost float in the air while the horse ran off, the noise of the hit still reverberating around the grounds, and then came the crash as he fell to the ground. "He's hurt," she heard someone say. "He's not moved," she heard someone say. It took her a moment to realize it as she who'd spoken, and by that time the Bold was off his horse helping Jon to his feet, and as she saw them walk, as she heard them laugh, she was glad it was over. She looked on as Jon spoke to the Bold and then looked back to the stands. His helm was off, and he seemed to be looking to her, and so she smiled. Seeing him smile back before he turned to nod at something the Bold said. "He did very well. 4 lances against the Bold. People will talk," Garland said, and she found that though she was proud of her future husband, she cared more for his safety than of what people thought of him. Jon. Flying was not all it was cracked up to be, he thought, jokingly, as he and Barristan walked back to the tent. He had been doing well, he thought, managing to deflect rather than absorb Barristan's lances. He had even felt the night move, which was why he had put so much effort into this thrust, and he had left himself open in the process, something that Barristan told him as they arrived at the tent. "I got to break lances with Sir Barristan the Bold. That, sir, is a dream come true." he said as the knight smiled. You are sure you are unhurt? Barristan asked. I am, sir. Go, I wish you good fortune. I'll need to hurry to see Lores's ride. Once the knight was gone and he was checked over by Jaime, Arthur, and even Walder, he was thankful that Loras was getting ready for his own ride, or no doubt he'd be checking him too. He was quickly helped out of his armor, and he arrived at the yard just as Loras was riding out, wishing his friend well as he nodded when he passed. Loziel didn't need it, and he beat Cirles in 3 to very loud cheers. Jon himself cheering even louder than most. Watching Jaime face Lord Rensley, he for some reason wished to see the man on the ground. He knew Rensley had danced with Marguerite, and he wasn't sure if it was just jealousy that he felt. Whatever it was, he didn't need to wait too long, and Rensley was beaten in 2. He even felt some concern for the man when he heard the crack as he hit the ground, only for it to be one of the gold antlers on his helm. When he saw the next list, he worried for Loras. Seeing him face the Strongboar, he felt he had no chance. Jaime, too, was facing one of his men from the west in Ser Autumn, and Prince Oberyn was to face Ser Roland Storm, while Barristan was facing Ser Richard Horp once again. He squired for both Loras and Jaime, helping to ready their horses and making sure their armor was polished even while they wore it still. You really don't have to do this, Jon. Jaime said, I am your squire, am I not? Besides, I can see better from down here anyway, he said, and Jaime chuckled as he readied for his ride. Standing beside him and handing him the lance, he readied himself to watch the ride and was surprised by how cleanly Jaime caught Ciudadam, the man losing in 1, though good-naturedly, as always, Jon grabbed the man's loose horse and brought it to him after he'd gotten back to his feet. I hate facing him, Ciudadam said, smirking as he and Jon walked back to the tents, and Jon handed him back his horse's reins. Well, at least we both walked away unharmed. Sir Adam, he said, and the knight chuckled as he walked off. He helped Loras prepare and felt more nervous about this ride than any of his own. He had managed to do as he promised Marguerite as far as he was concerned, but he needed his friend to be unharmed too if he was to keep the promise fully. Wishing him well, he paid even more attention to this joust than he had to any of the others. He was ready to warg for what good it would do, and as he heard the lances crash, he saw Loras move but stay seated. The Strongboar, though, brushed it off as if it was nothing. Loras caught him twice more, perfect shots to the chest, and yet they didn't move the man an inch. On the 4th, he caught him with a shot that was even better, and the man at least was knocked back some, but it was clear his friend lacked the strength to unseat him. Something the 5th tilt showed as once again he caught him flush. Though it was Loras, not Lyle, who was knocked from his horse, he was moving before Jon had a chance to, and so Jon grabbed his horse and then helped his friend walk a little gingerly from the yard. Are you well? Damn, that hurt. You caught him perfectly, Loras, each time. I've never seen such good work with the lance, he said, and Loras smiled as the Strongboar rode over. Do you really think so, Jon? Loras asked, but it was the booming voice of Lyle Craighall they heard. Well done, lad. Had you more weight or strength, I'd be on the ground. You should be proud of your performance today. I thank you, Sir Lyle, Loras said, and Jon could see how prideful his walk became. Then as they reached the back, the gingerness now was gone and the pain quickly forgotten. Jaime fell in the semifinals to the bold Jon, doing as he had the last time they met, taking his place in the stands, so he showed no favor. While not as epic as their tilt in King's Landing, it was still an excellent ride, and as Jon sat amongst his family and with joy making sure he was unharmed every few moments, he tried his best not to laugh. Ouchie, Jon? No, ouchie. You sure? She asked, raising her eyebrow. Sure. You get 10 nuts, Joy. All gone. We get more? Maybe later. Maybe we'll get a candied apple before we go back, he said, making her smile, and seeing both Arya and Lyanna stare at him eagerly while Sansa just smirked. Oberyn faced off against the Strongboar, who had surprised many by making it this far, and Jon looked to Eluria and his cousins, who looked on eagerly. 5 lances it took, and while Loras may not have had the strength, his uncle suffered from no such shortcoming. When it came time for the final, he looked on nervously, hoping for the result he wished for. Who'll win, Jon? Bran asked, and he saw Cregan and Robb look on with interest. Who do you think will win? He asked. The bold. No one can beat the bold, Bran said, his hero worship for knights clear. Even me, he said, and while the others chuckled, Bran thought he was having a go at him and began to apologize. No, you could have. I cheered for you, Jon. Honest, Bran said, and Jon reached over and mussed his hair. Thank you, little brother, and there's nothing wrong with thinking who'll win. But look, it's about to happen. Let's see if you're right. The two horses rode fast, and it was the bold's lance which hit better. The same on the second and the third tilt. It took to the fourth for Oberyn to get a hit of equal measure, and the fifth was a draw. The bold was almost immovable, almost solid, and Oberyn, it seemed, was getting frustrated, given how he grabbed the lance, as the two raced for the sixth. It happened. The bold's lance hit flush, and Oberyn flew from his horse. He heard Illyria's gasp from where he sat, and then looked on as Oberyn seemed to roll on the ground before he basically popped up on his feet once the roll was done. He looked to his aunt to see her relieved smile, and he, like the rest of the crowd, cheered Ser Barristan's victory. Your graces, my lord and ladies, I give you the victor of the joust at the tourney of Highgarden for Lady Margaery's name day, Ser Barristan Selmy, the bold himself. The herald said to even louder cheers. He watched as the bold rode to the garland, and then he picked it up on the end of the lance before he rode to name his queen. Lady Margaery, I would name you the queen of love and beauty. Barristan said, and Jon saw first her smile and then the surprised look on her face when she saw it, her smile beaming even more. I thank you, good sir, Margaery said as she looked towards him. A small nod was all she did, but it was enough for him to know she'd seen her favor tied to Barristan's belt. My queen, he thought to himself, as he watched her put the garland on her head.